Ethan Carter tore the note in half before he even finished reading it. Then he stopped. His hands were shaking. He pressed the two halves back together on the kitchen counter, smoothing them flat with his palm, like a man trying to undo something he couldn't take back. Meet me tomorrow at the old boathouse. 7 o'clock. Come alone. Please trust me. His daughter's laughter drifted from the next room. His late wife's photo watched him from the shelf. And the woman next door, the quiet one, who never asked anyone for anything, had just whispered 5 words that would break his heart wide open. This stays between us. But here's what Ethan didn't know yet. That note wasn't the beginning of the secret. It was the end of one that had been living 3 houses down for 6 long years. If you've ever discovered that someone loved you all along and you never noticed, comment the city you're watching from right now. I want to see how far this story travels tonight. And if stories about second chances after loss mean something to you, subscribe and stay with me to the very end. Because what's inside that memory box changes everything. Ethan Carter had not cried in 4 years, and he wasn't about to start over a piece of folded paper. He told himself that 3 times standing at the kitchen counter at 11 o'clock at night, and by the 3rd time, he almost believed it. The note lay in front of him, taped back together now, with a strip of clear tape he'd found in the junk drawer, the 2 halves of it lined up crooked, so the words bent in the middle. He'd read it maybe 40 times. He was reading it again. Dad. He nearly jumped out of his skin. Lily stood in the hallway in her dinosaur pajamas, hair a mess, 1 sock on and 1 sock off, holding the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 2. She squinted at him in the light. "You're supposed to be asleep, Bug," Ethan said, and he was proud of how normal his voice came out. "I heard you talking." "I wasn't talking." "You were. You said a bad word." He had. He'd said it quietly, but he'd said it. "Grown-ups say bad words when they stub their toe," he told her. "Come on, back to bed." She didn't move. She was 8 and 8-year-olds have a radar for the exact moment an adult is trying to hide something. "What's that paper?" "It's nothing. It's a coupon." "For what?" "For groceries." "Can I see it?" "No." That came out sharper than he meant. Lily's chin did the thing it did, the little crumple, and he crossed the kitchen in 2 steps and knelt down in front of her before the tears could start. Hey, I'm sorry. Daddy's tired, that's all. It's just boring grown-up mail and it's late and you have school tomorrow and I need my best girl to get some sleep." "Okay." She studied his face the way her mother used to. It undid him every time. "Okay," she said finally. "Will you tuck me in the tight way? The mummy way. The mummy way." He carried her down the hall, even though she was really getting too big for it now, and he wrapped the blanket around her the way she liked, tight as a burrito, and he sat on the edge of the bed until her breathing went slow and even. He watched her sleep for a long moment. She had Sarah's nose. She had Sarah's stubbornness. She had, God help him, Sarah's way of looking straight through him. 4 years. It had been 4 years since the accident, since the phone call on the interstate, since the world had split into before and after, and left him standing in the wreckage, holding a 4-year-old who kept asking when Mommy was coming home. He'd survived it. That was the word he used in his own head when he let himself think about it at all. Survived. He got up in the mornings. He packed lunches. He went to work at the hardware store. Came home, made dinner, did the bath, did the books, did the bedtime, and started over. He had not gone on a single date. He had not wanted to. Somewhere in the first year, he'd made a quiet decision, never spoken out loud, that his heart was closed for business, and that was fine. That was fine because Lily needed a father who was present, not a father who was out chasing something for himself. And now there was a note. He went back to the kitchen and looked at it again. He'd known Olivia Bennett for years, in the way you know a neighbor, which is to say hardly at all. She lived 3 houses down the little blue one, with the sagging porch and the garden that always looked like it was trying harder than the rest of the street. She was maybe 32. She worked at the county library. She was the kind of woman who waved, but didn't stop to talk, who brought a casserole when someone was sick and left it on the porch so she wouldn't have to knock. In 6 years, Ethan wasn't sure he'd had a conversation with her that lasted longer than the time it took to comment on the weather. He knew her father had died. He remembered that. Old Mr. Bennett, who used to sit on that same sagging porch with a transistor radio and holler at kids who cut across his lawn. He'd passed cancer, Ethan thought, and after that it had just been Olivia in the little blue house alone. That was the whole of what he knew about her. So when she'd pressed the note into his hand at the barbecue that afternoon, her fingers cold, even in the July heat, her eyes not quite meeting his, and whispered, "Don't read it here. This stays between us." His mind had gone straight to the worst places a father's mind goes. Was it Lily? Had Lily done something broken? A window said something rude scared her somehow. Had somebody seen something at the house called "somebody started something"? In the space of a heartbeat, Ethan had run through every disaster he could imagine, and the note had felt heavy as a brick in his pocket for the rest of the afternoon. Then he'd gotten home and put Lily to bed the first time and opened it. And it wasn't a complaint. It wasn't a warning. It was an invitation, and it was the most mysterious thing that had happened to him in 4 years. "Please trust me." He turned the phrase over and over. You didn't say, "Please trust me about something small." You said, "Please trust me" when you were about to ask for something large or confess to something you'd been hiding or step off a ledge you'd been standing on for a long time. At 1 in the morning, he finally went to bed, and he lay in the dark with his eyes open, and for the first time, in longer than he could remember, he felt something that wasn't grief and wasn't exhaustion. It took him a while to name it. It was curiosity. And underneath the curiosity buried so deep he almost missed it, was something that felt dangerously like hope. He didn't sleep at all. Morning came the way it always did, whether you'd slept or not. Lily had cereal on the couch, which was against the rules, but Ethan was too tired to enforce it. He watched her spoon soggy circles into her mouth while cartoons blared, and he thought about the note in his pocket, and he thought, I should just ask her. I should walk down there this morning and knock on the door and say, "Olivia, what's this about?" Like a normal person. He knew he wouldn't. There was a rhythm to being alone for a long time. You forgot how to reach out. Your hands got out of practice. He'd spent 4 years being the one people reached out to casseroles on the porch invitations. He politely declined the whole neighborhood, keeping a gentle, careful eye on the poor widower and his little girl. And somewhere in there, he'd forgotten how to be the one who reached back. "Dad, can Maddie come over after school?" "Not today, Bug." "Why not?" "Because Daddy has a thing tonight." Lily's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. She turned around and looked at him over the back of the couch with an expression of pure 8-year-old suspicion. "You never have a thing." "I have things." "Name one thing you've had." He opened his mouth and closed it. She had him there. When was the last time he'd had a thing? A plan? An appointment somewhere to be after dark that wasn't work or the pharmacy? He genuinely couldn't remember. "Aunt Carol's watching you tonight," he said. "For a couple hours, that's all." Lily's whole face changed. Aunt Carol wasn't really her aunt. She was Sarah's older sister, and she lived 2 towns over, and she spoiled Lily rotten with the specific fury of a woman who'd wanted kids of her own and never had them. "Aunt Carol's coming here. After school. She's going to make you dinner and you two can watch your movies." "Where are you going?" "Just out. Grown-up thing. Boring." He heard himself using the same word he'd used the night before. Boring. As if he could make it so by repeating it. Lily narrowed her eyes at him for a long moment. Then, apparently deciding that Aunt Carol and a movie night outweighed the mystery, she turned back around. "Okay, but you have to tell me if it's not boring." "It's boring," Ethan said. It was going to be, he was fairly sure, the least boring thing that had happened to him in 4 years. Carol showed up at 4:30 with a bag of groceries and a look on her face. He'd called her the night before, told her he needed a couple hours, asked if she could take Lily. And Carol, who had spent 4 years watching her dead sister's husband turn into a ghost of himself, had said yes so fast it was almost embarrassing. "So," she said, unloading the groceries onto his counter while Lily dragged her into the living room to show her a drawing. "A thing." "A thing. What kind of thing?" A neighbor thing. It's nothing. Carol set down a carton of eggs and looked at him. She had Sarah's eyes, too. The whole family did that same warm brown, and it always cost him a little something to be looked at by them. Ethan, honey, you called me at 11 o'clock at night to ask if I could watch Lily, so you could go do a thing. In 4 years, you have not once called me at 11 o'clock at night for anything except the time you thought Lily had swallowed a battery. She had a button, and it turned out to be I'm just saying. Carol crossed her arms. You've got a look. I haven't seen that look in a long time. There's no look. There's a look. Carol, I'm not asking, she said, holding up her hands. I want you to know that whatever it is, it's okay. You know that, right? Whatever it is, it's okay for you to have a thing. Her voice caught just slightly, and she turned quickly back to the groceries. Sarah would want you to have a thing. The kitchen went very quiet. In the other room, Lily was narrating her drawing to nobody. I don't even know what it is yet, Ethan said quietly. Then go find out. The old boathouse sat at the far end of the neighborhood, past the last of the houses where the road turned to gravel and the trees came down close to the water. Nobody used it anymore. It had belonged to the whole community once, back when there'd been a rowing club and summer regattas, but that was decades ago now, before Ethan's time. These days, it was just a weathered wooden building at the edge of the lake, half forgotten, the kind of place teenagers went to drink, and everyone else forgot existed. He got there at 6:52. He'd meant to be exactly on time, not early, not eager, but he'd left the house too soon because he couldn't sit still, and he'd driven around the block twice like an idiot, and now here he was, early anyway, his heart going like he'd run the whole way. Olivia was already there. She was standing at the edge of the water with her back to him, arms wrapped around herself, even though it was warm. She'd changed out of the sundress she'd worn to the barbecue into jeans and a soft gray sweater, and her hair was down, and she looked. Ethan noticed this, and then immediately felt guilty for noticing it. She looked younger than he'd ever registered before, smaller, like someone bracing for a blow. He said her name, and she turned around, and he saw that she'd been crying. Not crying right then, but recently. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she'd clearly wiped at them, and there was a small cardboard box on the old bench beside her that she kept glancing at like it might get up and leave. You came, she said. You said please. That got the smallest ghost of a smile out of her. I wasn't sure you would. I thought, I don't know what I thought, that you'd throw it away, that you'd think I was... She stopped. She pressed her lips together. Her hands were trembling. I've written this 100 times in my head, and now that you're here, I can't remember a single word of it. Olivia. Ethan took a slow step closer. His father's radar was still going, still scanning for the disaster. But the longer he looked at her, the more it dawned on him that whatever this was, it wasn't a disaster. It was something else. Something that had cost her enormously to set in motion. Just start anywhere. It's okay, whatever it is. Do you remember, she said, the winter 3 years ago, the ice storm, when the power went out for 4 days? He blinked. Of all the things he'd expected, a weather event from 3 years back wasn't one of them. The big one. Yeah, sure, the whole grid went down. Trees came through the Henderson's roof. You came to my house. He frowned, reaching back. It was fuzzy. 4 days without power in January with a 5-year-old, those days had blurred together into a haze of candles and canned soup and trying to keep Lily warm. You had a generator, Olivia said, one of those little ones, and on the second day you went around the whole street house to house checking on people. And you got to mine, and I hadn't answered the barbecue. I hadn't answered anybody, and you didn't just knock and leave. You could hear I was in there, and you didn't leave. Something was coming back to him now at the edges. My pipes had frozen, she said. And I didn't know what to do, and my dad had. My dad had passed that fall, and it was my first winter alone. My first anything alone. And I was sitting in that cold house in the dark, and I had genuinely started to think in a way I'd never thought before, that it might be easier to just not be here anymore. Her voice was very steady now, the way people get steady when they're saying the hardest thing. I want you to understand what I mean. I don't mean I was sad. I mean I was sitting there in the cold doing math about whether anyone would notice. Ethan felt the ground shift under him. And you knocked, Olivia said. And when I didn't answer, you didn't leave. You said you probably don't even remember you said, Olivia, it's Ethan from down the street. I've got heat and hot food and I'm not taking no for an answer, so you can either open this door or I'll stand out here in the cold until you feel bad enough to. He did remember, faintly. He'd said something like that. He'd been half joking. He'd been cold himself and just wanted to finish the block and get back to Lily. You ran an extension cord from your generator across 2 yards to a space heater in my living room, she said. You brought me soup your daughter had helped make. She'd put too much pepper in it, and you apologized for it, and it was the first thing I'd laughed at in months. You stayed for an hour. You didn't make it weird. You didn't make me talk. You just sat there and made sure I ate and told me terrible jokes, and then you went home to your little girl. Her eyes were filling again. And when you left, I sat on my floor and cried because for the first time since my father died, I had proof that someone would notice, that I mattered enough for someone to cross 2 frozen yards in an ice storm. The lake was very quiet. Somewhere out on the water, a bird called. I don't know what to say, Ethan said, and it was the truth. I didn't, Olivia, that was just anybody would have. No. Her voice cracked like a whip, sudden and fierce, and it startled him. No, they wouldn't have. That's the thing. Nobody else did. I had a whole street of neighbors, and you were the only one who crossed the yard. And it wasn't the only time. It was never the only time. She reached over and picked up the cardboard box and held it against her chest. And Ethan understood that they hadn't even gotten to the real reason she'd asked him here. After my father died. Olivia said, you brought groceries to my porch every week for 2 months. You never knocked. You never wanted a thank you. There'd just be a bag there, milk, bread, eggs, the boring stuff you forget to buy when you can't get out of bed. I used to watch you from the window. You'd walk up, set it down, and walk away like it was nothing. Ethan had no memory of this at all, which somehow made it worse. You fixed my porch step, she went on. The rotted one, the one my dad kept saying he'd get to. I came home from work one day and it was just fixed. New wood. You'd matched the paint. I never asked you. I never even told you it was broken. You just noticed and you did it, and you never said a word. The step by the... He remembered that one, actually. He'd been out on a walk with Lily and seen the sag in it, seen how it could catch an old woman's heel or a kid's toe. And it had bothered him the way a crooked picture frame bothered him, and he'd fixed it on a Saturday morning without thinking twice. I forgot about that. You forgot about it, Olivia repeated softly. You forget about all of it. That's what I finally understood. To you, these were nothing. They were Tuesdays. And to me... Her breath hitched. To me, they were the reason I made it through. Every single one of them. You have no idea, Ethan. You have absolutely no idea that the woman 3 houses down was keeping a list. That there was somebody in this world for whom your ordinary kindness was the entire difference between drowning and staying afloat. He didn't know what to do with his hands. He didn't know what to do with any of it. 4 years of thinking his life had shrunk down to nothing. 4 years of surviving, and this woman was standing in front of him telling him that all that time, without even knowing it, he'd been keeping someone alive. That Thanksgiving, Olivia said, 2 years ago, when you saw my lights off and figured out I was going to spend it alone, and you knocked on my door and said Lily had made too many place cards and there was an extra seat. There wasn't an extra seat. I found out later Carol had to run to the store for more potatoes because you'd just invited me on the spot. You made a whole holiday appear out of thin air, so I wouldn't have to be alone, and you did it so casually, I almost believed the place card story. Lily did make too many place cards, Ethan said weakly. Ethan. There were like 6 place cards for 4 people. That part was true. And to his surprise, Olivia laughed a real laugh, wet and surprised, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. God, she said. Even now you're trying to make it smaller than it was. I'm not good at... He stopped. Start it over. When people say nice things about me, I don't. He shook his head. It's easier to make it smaller. I know, Olivia said. I know it is. I've watched you do it for 6 years. She took a shaky breath. And that's part of why I could never do this exact thing right now. Because I knew you'd make it small, and I couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear to hand you the biggest thing I have and watch you set it down like a bag of groceries and walk away. The words hung in the air between them. The biggest thing I have. And Ethan Carter, who had not let himself feel anything real in 4 years, felt his heart start to pound for an entirely different reason than the one that had kept him up all night. Olivia, he said carefully, what's in the box? She looked down at it. Her thumb ran along the cardboard edge worn soft, like she'd done it 1,000 times. When I was a girl, she said, not answering, my mother left. I don't talk about it. She just left when I was 9, and it was my dad and me after that, and he was a good man, but he was a quiet man, and he didn't know what to do with a daughter who felt everything so loudly. So I learned to keep it in. I learned to want things silently. I got so good at it that I could love a whole person for years and never let a single word out. Her voice dropped almost to a whisper. I got so good at being invisible that I forgot people could actually see me. Until an ice storm 3 years ago when one of them did. Olivia, please let me finish. Please. If I stop, I'll never start again. She held the box tighter. I've had feelings for you. For a long time. Longer than I'm going to admit out loud, because it's embarrassing, and because I know your situation, and I have never once wanted to be one more weight on a man who's already carrying more than anyone should. I watched you raise that little girl by yourself. I watched you get up every single day when I know there were mornings you didn't want to. And I thought the last thing that man needs is his lonely neighbor mooning over him from 3 houses down. So I said nothing. For 3 years I said nothing. I told myself I'd rather have you as the person who fixed my porch than lose you by wanting more. She finally lifted her eyes to his. And then yesterday at the barbecue, that woman Denise from the realtor's office, she was flirting with you. Right in front of everyone, touching your arm, laughing too loud. And you were being polite. You didn't even really notice, but I noticed. And I stood there by the coolers, and I felt something I have never felt in my life. I felt like I was going to lose something that was never even mine. And I thought, Olivia, if you spend one more day being invisible one day, you're going to watch him fall for someone else and marry her and be happy. And you will have to live the rest of your life in the little blue house 3 doors down, knowing you never said one single word. Her hands were shaking so hard now the box rattled faintly. So I wrote the note, she said, before I could talk myself out of it. And I put it in your hand, and I've spent the last 24 hours certain I've ruined the one good thing in my life. She held the box out toward him. This is everything I never said. I want you to have it. I want you to open it, and I want you to know exactly how long and exactly how much, and then you can do whatever you want. You can walk away. You can say you don't feel the same. You can never look at me again, and I'll understand. I'll move if I have to. Olivia. I'll figure something out. I just couldn't spend one more. Olivia. She stopped. Ethan reached out and very gently put his hand over hers on the lid of the box, so that neither of them was opening it and neither of them was closing it. I almost tore up your note, he said quietly. Last night. I actually did tear it. I taped it back together. Her face went stricken. Let me finish now. You had your turn. He almost smiled. Almost. You want to know why I almost tore it up? You want to know what I thought your big secret was? He took a breath. I thought it was a complaint. I swear to God. I thought my daughter's got soccer practice in the yard and she's loud, and I do the lawn late at night sometimes because it's the only quiet time I get, and I've been meaning to fix that back gate that bangs in the wind, and I looked at that note and I thought the quiet lady down the street has finally had enough of the noise and she's too polite to say it to my face. Olivia stared at him. And then she couldn't help it. A sound came out of her, half a sob and half a laugh, the two of them tangled up together. You thought I asked you to a secret meeting at a boathouse to complain about your lawnmower. When you put it that way, it sounds stupid. It's very stupid, Ethan. I've been alone a long time, he said. I've kind of forgotten that people might want things from me that aren't complaints. And there it was. The thing he'd been circling all night without letting himself land on it. He heard it come out of his own mouth, and it stopped him cold. I've forgotten that people might want things from me. When had that happened? When had he decided that the only reason anyone would ever seek him out was to tell him something was wrong? He looked at Olivia. Really looked at her, the way he hadn't let himself look at anyone in 4 years. And he saw a woman who had spent 3 years keeping a box of proof that his life had mattered, that his small forgotten kindnesses had landed somewhere and taken root and grown into something enormous. And he felt the wall he'd built 4 years ago, the one he'd told himself was for Lily, the one he'd hidden behind and called it strength. He felt it move. I don't know what I feel, he said honestly, because she'd been honest and she deserved nothing less. I want to be straight with you because you've been braver in the last 10 minutes than I've been in 4 years and you deserve the truth. I don't know what I feel yet. I've had a wall up so long I'm not sure I know how to take it down. I'm not sure I remember what's behind it. Olivia nodded, and he saw her start to fold in on herself, start to armor up for the letdown, and he tightened his hand over hers. But, he said, I'm still standing here. I drove around the block twice because I couldn't sit still. I didn't sleep at all last night. And when you were talking just now when you told me about the ice storm, about sitting in the cold doing math about whether anyone would notice, his voice thickened, and he had to stop and clear it. Something in my chest did something it hasn't done in 4 years. I don't have a name for it yet, but I felt it. For the first time in 4 years, I felt something. And it wasn't grief, and it wasn't fear. Her eyes were streaming now openly, and she wasn't wiping them anymore. So no, Ethan said. I'm not going to walk away. I'm not going to tell you I don't feel the same because I don't know yet what I feel, and I'm done. I'm done lying to make things smaller. But I'm not walking away. He looked down at their 2 hands on the lid of the box. What I am going to do is this. I'm going to ask you to be patient with a man who's forgotten how any of this works. And I'm going to open this box with you. Right here, right now. And you're going to tell me the story of every single thing in it. And I'm going to listen to all of it. And I'm not going to make one single piece of it smaller than it was. Olivia let out a long, trembling breath, the breath of someone who had been holding it for 3 years. Okay, she whispered. Okay. And together 4 hands on one small cardboard box at the edge of a lake. As the light started to go gold over the water, they lifted the lid. The lid came off, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Ethan looked down into the box and didn't know what he'd expected. Something small, maybe something you could take in with one glance. But it was full. It was full the way a life is full. Layers of it. Paper and photographs and small objects tucked into the corners, and on top of everything, a single dried flower, brown and flat, pressed between 2 pieces of wax paper. That's the first thing, Olivia said softly. You can start there. He picked it up carefully, like it might crumble. What is it? It's from the funeral, my father's. She swallowed. You sent flowers. You and Lily. There was a card that said Mr. Bennett always waved at us. We'll miss him. In a little girl's handwriting. Her voice wavered. I pressed one of the flowers. I don't know why. I think I just needed to keep proof that somebody had noticed he was gone. Ethan sat down slowly on the old bench beside the box. He remembered the flowers. He remembered helping Lily sound out the words on the card, her tongue between her teeth, working so hard on the letters. He had not thought about it once in 3 years. You kept a flower for 3 years, he said. I kept everything for 3 years, Ethan. That's what I'm trying to tell you. 12 minutes. That was all it had been since he'd lifted the lid, and already he could feel the shape of his life rearranging itself item by item in his own hands. He set the flower down gently and reached for the next thing, a stack of photographs held together with a rubber band that had gone dry and split. He slid it off, and it broke, and he caught the pieces. These are... He turned the top one over. It was his own front porch, his own house taken from a distance. Lily in the yard, maybe 6 years old, mid-jump over a sprinkler frozen in the air with her arms flung out. "Olivia, did you take pictures of my house?" She winced. "When you say it like that, it sounds like a crime." "Did you—" Not like that. Not creepy." She pressed her hands to her face. "This is the part I was afraid of. This is exactly the part." "Okay." "Yes. Sometimes from my window when you and Lily were out front, and it was so normal. It was the most normal, beautiful thing, a dad and his little girl in the yard on a Saturday. And I lived alone in a quiet house, and I would look out, and I would think, that's what it's supposed to look like. That's what a family looks like. And once, just once, I took a picture, and then I took another one. And I know how it sounds. How many are there?" She didn't answer. He went through them. There weren't dozens. There were maybe 15 spread across years, and not one of them was strange the way she was so afraid they'd be. They were tender. Lily on her first day of second grade with a backpack too big for her. Ethan carrying groceries. The two of them shoveling snow, Lily's shovel, comically small. A woman looking out a window at a family she wasn't part of, and loving them anyway. "I stopped," Olivia said, barely above a whisper. "I want you to know I stopped. 2 years ago, I looked at what I was doing, and I was so ashamed of myself. I thought you've become a sad woman who photographs other people's happiness. And I put the camera away, and I never did it again. But I couldn't throw these out. God help me, I could not throw them out." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "You know what I see when I look at these," he finally said. "Please don't." "I see somebody who was starving," he said, "not somebody creepy. Somebody who was so hungry for a family that she'd take a photograph of one through a window 3 houses down." He looked up at her. "Olivia, that's not a thing to be ashamed of. That's the loneliest thing I've ever seen in my life, and I've spent 4 years being an expert on loneliness." She made a sound like all the air had gone out of her, and she sat down hard on the bench beside him, and for a second he thought she might come apart entirely. 15 minutes ago, she said, wiping her face. "I was sure that when you saw these, you'd get up and leave." "I'm not going anywhere. I told you that." "People say that. I'm not people," Ethan said, and it came out with more edge than he meant, more certainty than he'd felt in years. "I've spent 4 years being the guy that people say things to and then walk away from anyway. I know exactly what it feels like to be told you're not going to be left and then get left. I would not do that to you. Not tonight. Not after this." She looked at him then, and something passed between them, quick and electric, and both of them looked away at the same time, because it was too much, too fast. "Keep going," she said. "Please, if we stop now, I'll lose my nerve." 20 minutes. He reached into the box again. The next thing his fingers found was a small brass key on a leather fob worn smooth. He held it up, puzzled. This is my spare key, my garage key. I lost this." He frowned, calculating. "I lost this 2 summers ago. I tore the whole yard apart looking for it. I had to have the lock rekeyed." Olivia went very still. "Olivia, you dropped it," she said quickly. "You dropped it in the street. I saw it happen from my porch. You were carrying too much. You had Lily's bike and a bag of mulch and about 4 other things, and it fell out of your pocket, and you didn't notice, and you went inside. So why didn't you give it back?" The silence stretched. "That's the confession I really came here to make," Olivia said. Her voice had gone thin. "That's worse than the photographs. I picked it up, and I was going to walk it over, I swear I was, and I got as far as your driveway. And then I stopped, because I realized that if I gave it back, that was it. That was the whole conversation. Here's your key. Thanks, bye. 30 seconds. But if I kept it," she pressed her lips together, ashamed. "If I kept it, then I had a reason. I had a thing that was ours. I had a secret that connected me to you, even if you never knew it existed. I stood in your driveway with your key in my hand, and I made the most pathetic decision of my life. I kept a piece of you because I didn't have any other piece. Ethan stared at the key in his palm. I told my daughter she must have lost it, he said slowly. I made Lily feel bad about a key you had the whole time. Olivia flinched like he'd struck her. I know. When I heard she told me at the mailbox once, she said, I'm the one who lost Daddy's key, I'm not allowed to hold keys anymore. And Ethan. I wanted to die. I wanted to sink into the ground. I almost confessed the whole thing right there to an 8-year-old. That's when I knew I'd become a person I didn't recognize. A person who let a child take the blame so a lonely woman could keep a secret. Why are you telling me this? He asked, not angry, genuinely lost. You could have thrown that key in the lake, and I'd never have known. You could have shown me the flowers and the photographs, the pretty sad things, and left the key out. Why give me the one thing that makes you look bad? Because, Olivia said, and her voice broke clean in half. If I'm going to ask you to love me, then I'm not going to ask you to love a made-up version of me. I did a small, sad, selfish thing. I've done a few of them. And if you're going to decide anything about me tonight, you're going to decide about the real one. The one who kept your key. Not the one who only fixed your porch. She turned to face him fully. I have been invisible my whole life, Ethan. Do you understand? My mother looked right through me and left. My father loved me but never saw me. I have spent 31 years being the woman nobody quite notices, and I decided that if I was finally going to be seen by one person before I die, I was going to be seen completely. The good and the pathetic. All of it. Or none of it. And that was the thing that cracked Ethan Carter open. Not the flowers, not the photographs, the key. The confession he hadn't asked for the ugly small human thing she'd handed him on purpose because she was done being anything less than real. He reached over and closed her trembling hand around the brass key. Keep it, he said. What? The key. Keep it. Just this time keep it because I gave it to you, not because you took it. His voice was rough. That's the difference, right? That's the whole difference between everything you've been and everything you could be. Nobody has to steal a piece of me anymore, Olivia. You can just have one. She looked down at the key in her hand, at his hand still around hers, and she started to cry in a way that scared him a little, deep and silent, her shoulders shaking. 23 years of being unseen, breaking loose all at once. 25 minutes. He put his arm around her, awkward and unpracticed, and she leaned into him, and he held his dead wife's memory in one part of his heart, and this living, weeping, painfully honest woman in the other, and for a moment he genuinely didn't know how a man was supposed to hold both. I'm sorry, she said into his shoulder. I'm sorry I didn't want to fall apart. I wanted to be... Stop apologizing for being a person, Ethan said. I've been apologizing for 4 years. It doesn't fix anything, trust me. She laughed through the tears, a wet, broken sound, and pulled back and wiped her face with both hands. Okay. There's more. There's not. It's not all sad, I promise. Some of it's stupid. Look. She reached past him into the box and pulled out 2 small stubs of paper, faded almost to nothing. Movie tickets, she said. The Dollar Theater downtown, the one that closed. Do you remember? No, you wouldn't remember? Of course you wouldn't. Try me. About 4 years ago, right after everything happened with your wife. Maybe 6 months after. You took Lily to a matinee. Some cartoon. And I happened to be there alone in the back watching a movie by myself on a Sunday like I always did. And you didn't see me. But I saw you. Her thumb ran over the ticket stubs. And Lily she was so little, and she was going through a hard time. You could see it. She was clingy and sad the way kids get. And halfway through the movie, she started to cry. Not about the movie. About, you know. And you picked her up, and you didn't take her out. You didn't get embarrassed. You just held her in that dark theater, and you rocked her, and I heard you whispering to her. And I was 3 rows back, and I heard you say, I've got you, Bug. I've got you. Daddy's not going anywhere. Ethan didn't say anything. He was looking at the ticket stubs in her hand. And I sat in the dark, Olivia said. And I watched a man who had just lost his whole world hold his little girl together with his bare hands. And I thought that. That is the strongest thing I have ever seen a person do. And I kept my ticket. And a few weeks later, when I saw you were going again, I went to the same movie just so I could keep the second one." She laughed at herself, embarrassed. "2 ticket stubs from movies I barely watched because I couldn't stop watching you be a father. That's the night I almost gave up," Ethan said. Olivia went silent. That week. He was staring straight ahead now at the water, at nothing. That was the worst stretch. Lily was crying every night and I hadn't slept and I couldn't. I remember standing in the kitchen one night after I finally got her down, and I looked at the clock and it was 2 in the morning and I thought, I can't do this. I cannot do this. I'm going to fail her. She lost her mom, and now she's got a dad who's cracking apart, and she's going to lose him too. His jaw was tight. I don't talk about that week. I've never told anybody about that week. Carol doesn't even know. And you're telling me that in the middle of it, the very same days, I thought I was invisible, and drowning you were 3 rows back in a movie theater watching me thinking I was strong. You were strong, Olivia whispered. I didn't feel strong. I felt like I was dying. That's what strong looks like, she said. From 3 rows back. That's what it looks like to somebody else. You were dying and you held her anyway. Do you know what that did for me? Do you know how many nights I got myself out of bed because I thought if Ethan Carter can get up, I can get up? 30 minutes. And there it was, the thing sitting underneath this whole strange evening laid bare at last. They had been saving each other for years without either of them knowing it. He had pulled her out of the cold in an ice storm, and she had pulled herself out of the dark on nights he'd never know about, using the sight of him as a rope. 2 drowning people, 3 houses apart, each one certain they were drowning alone. We've been living the same life, Ethan said slowly. This whole time, in 2 different houses, both of us thinking we were the only one. I know, Olivia said. I've known for 3 years. You're just finding out tonight. The unfairness of it hit him like a physical thing, that she'd carried this alone for so long, that she'd known they were the same and he hadn't. That she'd had to sit in her quiet house with the whole shape of it while he stumbled around 3 doors down, thinking his life was empty. Why didn't you just tell me? And it came out almost desperate. Any of it, years ago. You could have knocked on my door and said one true thing and I— And you what? Olivia said, not unkindly. Be honest. 4 years ago, 3 years ago, if I had knocked on your door and said, Ethan, I have feelings for you, I've been watching you be a father and it's undone me, what would you have done? He opened his mouth. He closed it. You'd have panicked, she said gently. You'd have gotten polite and careful the way you get, and you'd have said something kind about not being ready, and then you'd have started avoiding me. You'd have waved from the yard and found reasons not to stop. I'd have lost even the little I had. I ran that exact conversation in my head 1,000 times, Ethan, and it ended the same way every single time. I was protecting the only thing I had. A woman doesn't gamble her last dollar unless she's already lost everything else. So what changed? He asked. Why now? Why tonight? And Olivia's face did something then that he hadn't seen yet. It hardened just slightly with something that wasn't quite fear. Something closer to fury. Denise, she said. The realtor, from the barbecue. You really didn't notice, did you? Notice what? She was talking to me. About the market. About whether I'd ever sell the house. He shrugged. It was nothing. Ethan. Olivia turned to face him. She had her hand on your arm for 20 minutes. She laughed at everything you said. She told you your daughter was just precious, and then she asked you in front of me whether you'd ever thought about giving Lily a mother figure. And you know what you did? You got that look. That careful, polite, cornered look. And I stood by the coolers, and I watched a woman circle you like you were a house she was about to put an offer on. And I realized she's going to do it. Not her maybe, but someone. Some Denise. Some perfectly nice woman is going to come along and see what I've seen for 3 years, and she's going to be braver than me, or luckier than me, or just there at the right moment, and she's going to walk right up and take the thing I was too scared to reach for. Her hands had balled into fists in her lap. And I stood there, she said, her voice shaking with something new. and I felt something I have never felt in my entire quiet, invisible, well-behaved life. I felt like breaking every plate at that barbecue. I have spent 31 years being calm and small, and easy to overlook, and in one afternoon, that woman made me feel like I was going to lose the one thing I'd built my whole secret life around, and I could not. I would not go home to that little blue house one more time and live with the what if. I'd rather you reject me to my face than lie awake at 70 years old wondering. 35 minutes. Ethan was staring at her like he was seeing her for the first time, and in a way he was. The quiet woman who left casseroles on porches, who waved but never stopped, who'd made herself so small for so long, and underneath it, this. This fire. This person capable of tearing the whole careful structure of her life down to the studs, rather than lose one more thing to silence. "You were jealous," he said, not mocking, wondering. "I was terrified," Olivia corrected. "Jealousy is what people feel about things that are theirs. You were never mine. I had no right. That's what made it unbearable. I was watching myself lose something I'd never even had the courage to want out loud." She let out a shaky breath. "So I went home from the barbecue, and I got out this box, and I sat on my floor, and I wrote you that note before I could think better of it, and I've spent every hour since then certain I'd made the worst mistake of my life. You didn't." "You don't know that yet. We haven't gotten to the bottom of the box." Something in the way she said it made the back of his neck prickle. "What's at the bottom, Olivia?" She didn't answer. She reached into the box instead and lifted out a bundle of envelopes. Maybe a dozen of them tied with a length of ordinary kitchen string. They were addressed. He could see that even in the fading light they were addressed to him, to Ethan Carter. His name in her handwriting over and over. "Letters," she said. "That I never sent. Almost one for every important thing that happened. The night of the ice storm. Every Thanksgiving. The day I saw you teach Lily to ride her bike without the training wheels, and she fell, and you didn't rush over, you just said, 'Get up, you've got this.' And she did, and I cried at my window like a lunatic. I'd write it all down, everything I couldn't say, and then I'd tie it up and put it in the box, because writing it was the only safe way to feel it. Can I read them?" "No." She clutched them to her chest, then seemed to catch herself, and slowly, painfully, she held them back out. "Yes. God. Yes. That's the whole point, isn't it? Yes. But not all of them. Not tonight. Take them home. Read them when I'm not sitting right here watching your face, because I don't think I can survive watching your face." She pressed them into his hands. "But there's one you have to see now. It's why we're here. It's not with the others." And she reached to the very bottom of the box underneath everything and drew out a single envelope. It was different from the rest. It wasn't addressed to him. It was a birthday card he could tell by the shape still sealed the flap, tucked in, but never licked shut. And on the front of the envelope in Olivia's careful hand was written a single word. Lily. "That's for my daughter," Ethan said. 3 years ago," Olivia said very quietly. "Lily turned 5, first birthday after her mom passed. You had a little party in the backyard. I could hear it from my house, the kids, the music. And I stood at my kitchen window, and I thought about that little girl having a birthday without her mother. And something in me just I had to do something. So I drove to the store and I bought her a card, a birthday card. And I sat at my kitchen table for 2 hours trying to write something in it. Something that would mean something to a motherless 5-year-old from the strange, quiet lady down the street." "What did you write?" "Everything," Olivia said. "And nothing. I filled it up, and I threw it away, and I bought another one and started over. 4 cards. 4. And on the 4th one, I finally wrote what I meant, and I sealed it, and I walked it over to your house." Her voice was barely there now. "And I got to your gate, and I could hear you all laughing. And I looked at that happy little party, and I thought, who am I? Who am I to insert myself into this? To hand a grieving man a card from a woman he barely knows on his daughter's first birthday without her mother. I'll ruin it. I'll make it sad. I'll make it about me. So I turned around, and I walked home, and I put the card in the bottom of the box, and I have never opened it again. 40 minutes. Ethan looked down at the sealed envelope at his daughter's name in Olivia's handwriting, at 3 years of silence, pressed flat in a cardboard box. What does it say? I don't remember, Olivia whispered. That's the honest truth. I've been too afraid to open it. 3 years and I've never once broken that seal because as long as it's sealed, it's still a thing I might do someday. If I open it, it becomes a thing I didn't do. Do you understand? It's the last of my what-ifs. It's the very last one. Ethan turned the envelope over in his hands. His thumb found the tucked flap. May I? Olivia went white. I don't. You said you were done with what-ifs. You said that an hour ago. You wrote me a note, and you handed me a box, and you told me you'd rather be rejected to my face than lie awake at 70. He held her eyes. This is the last one. You said so yourself. So let's not leave one alive. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then slowly she nodded. He opened the flap. He slid the card out. On the front was a cartoon cake with 5 candles. He opened it, and Olivia's writing filled the inside, and he read it out loud in the gathering dark, his voice getting rougher with every line. Dear Lily, you don't know me very well. I'm the lady from the blue house down the street, the one with the messy garden. I wanted to tell you happy birthday, and I wanted to tell you one other thing, because I think somebody should, and I don't know if anyone has. I lost my mom too. Not the same way you lost yours, but I know a little about what it's like to grow up with an empty chair, and I want you to know something that took me a very long time to learn. The love doesn't leave, it just changes shape. Your mom's love didn't go anywhere. It's in your dad, who I watch take such good care of you. It's in the way people in this neighborhood look out for you, even the quiet ones you don't notice. Love is all around you, Lily standing a little closer than you think. You just have to be brave enough to see it. Happy birthday, sweet girl. From your neighbor who sees you. Ethan stopped. His hands were not steady. He read the last line again silently to himself. From your neighbor who sees you. You wrote that for a 5-year-old, he said, 3 years ago, and you never gave it to her. I was a coward, Olivia said. No. He set the card down carefully on the bench between them, like it was something holy. No, that's Olivia. Do you know what I've spent 3 years trying to figure out how to say to my daughter that exact thing, those exact words? The love doesn't leave, it just changes shape. I have laid awake trying to find a way to explain to her where her mother went, and I have never once gotten it as right as you got it in a birthday card you were too scared to deliver. Olivia was crying again, but differently now. Not the deep, silent shaking. Something softer. Something that looked almost like relief. She started and stopped. There's one more thing you should know. About that card. About why it matters more than you think. 45 minutes and the prickle came back to his neck stronger. What? I told you I lost my mom. Olivia's voice had dropped very low. I told you she left when I was 9. That's true. But I didn't tell you the rest, and I need to because it's the whole reason I could write that card, and it's the whole reason I've never been able to walk away from you and Lily, no matter how much sense it would have made to. Ethan waited. He didn't breathe. When my mother left, Olivia said, my father told everyone she'd walked out. And she had. But what he didn't tell people, what he didn't tell me for years, was why. She was sick, Ethan. In her mind. She'd been sick for a long time, and one night it got so heavy, she decided the people she loved would be better off without her, and she left so we wouldn't have to watch. And a few months after she left, she was gone. And I grew up thinking my mother abandoned me, because I wasn't enough to stay for. Her voice cracked. It took me until I was almost 30 to understand that she didn't leave because I wasn't enough. She left because she was drowning, and she genuinely truly believed we'd be better off. She was wrong. God, she was so wrong. But she believed it. The lake was black now. Neither of them had noticed the light go. That's why the ice storm was different, Olivia said. That's the part I couldn't say before. When I was sitting in that cold house 3 years ago doing the math I told you about, I wasn't just some sad, lonely woman. I was my mother's daughter. I have her sickness in me. It's quieter than hers was, and I take care of it now. I promise you I do, but that winter, it had me by the throat. And I sat there, and I heard her voice in my head saying the same thing she must have heard they'd be better off. Except I didn't have a they. I didn't have anybody who'd be worse off. I was going to prove my mother right, that some people really are better off gone, and then you crossed 2 frozen yards with a bowl of over-peppered soup, and you knocked on my door, and you would not leave. She was looking at him with everything she had. You didn't just do me a kindness that night, Ethan. You reached into the exact place my mother disappeared into, and you pulled me back out. You have no idea. You never had any idea. You thought you were being neighborly. You were being the thing that stood between me and the thing that took my mother. Ethan couldn't speak, so when Lily lost her mom, Olivia went on gently now, and I stood at my window and watched that little girl at her party. I didn't just feel sorry for her. I was her. I was the kid with the empty chair who was about to spend the rest of her life wondering if she wasn't enough, and I could not stand the thought of her growing up believing that. I couldn't. So I bought a card and I tried to tell one motherless girl the thing I wish somebody had told me when I was small. That the love doesn't leave. That it's all around her. That she's seen. Her voice broke completely. And then I was too much of a coward to give it to her. And she spent 3 years without those words because I couldn't cross 1 yard, and I have never forgiven myself for it. 50 minutes into the dark, and Ethan Carter understood at last exactly what he was holding. Not a birthday card, not a box of a lonely woman's secrets, but the whole hidden architecture of a person. A woman who had been left by a mother who thought she was doing her a kindness. A woman who carried that same darkness and fought it in silence. A woman who had watched his family through a window, not because she was strange, but because she was trying to give a grieving child the one true thing that no one had ever given her. "Give it to her," he said. Olivia blinked. "What?" "The card. Come to the house, this week, and give it to my daughter yourself." He picked the card back up and held it out to her. "You said the seal was your last what if. It's not. This is. The what if isn't whether you open it. It's whether you're brave enough to hand it to the person it was meant for and say the words to her face. That's the last one, Olivia. That's the one you've been running from for 3 years. She stared at the card. She stared at him. "She won't remember me," Olivia said. "She's 8 now. She won't, what will I even—" "She'll remember you," Ethan said. "She talks about you, you know. The nice lady with the garden. She asked me once why you always look sad." He heard his own voice thicken. "I didn't have an answer for her. Now I do." And Olivia Bennett, who had been invisible her whole life, who had made herself small enough to disappear, who had loved a family through a window and never once been seen doing it, reached out with a shaking hand and took the birthday card from him and pressed it to her chest and said the only word she had left. "Okay, 55 minutes." The box sat open between them, nearly empty now, its secrets loose in the world at last. And Ethan realized with a strange calm settling over him that he'd come to this boathouse braced for bad news, certain that a secret handed to him in the dark could only mean trouble, and instead he'd been handed a mirror. A full accounting of a life he'd thought was worthless, kept by the one person who'd been paying attention. He looked at the woman beside him clutching a 3-year-old birthday card like a lifeline, and he felt the last of the wall he'd built 4 years ago come down quietly without a sound, the way walls come down when you finally stop holding them up. "I need to tell you something too," he said. "You've done all the talking. You've handed me your whole life. It's not fair for me to just sit here and take it." Olivia looked up wary and hopeful all at once. "You don't have to." "I do, though." He took a breath. 4 years ago, I decided I was done. Not the way you mean. I don't mean it that way. I mean, I decided I was done wanting anything for myself. I made this deal in my head, this bargain, that I'd pour everything I had into Lily, and I'd never ask for one thing back, because asking for something for myself felt like cheating on Sarah. Like every good thing I let myself have was a good thing I was taking away from her memory. His jaw worked. So I built a wall. I told everybody I was fine. I turned down every casserole, every invitation, every well-meaning setup. I made myself into a man who couldn't be reached, and I told myself it was for my daughter, and it was the biggest lie I ever told. Ethan, you want to know the worst part? He almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. The worst part is, I got so good at not wanting anything that I forgot the wall was even there. I thought that flat, gray, surviving feeling was just life. I thought that's what was left. I genuinely believed my heart was empty, and I'd made my peace with it. He turned to look at her fully. And then a woman I barely knew put a note in my hand and told me it was a secret, and for the first time in 4 years, I felt my heart do something, and it scared the hell out of me, Olivia, because I realized the wall wasn't protecting me from grief. It was protecting me from this. From exactly this. From being seen by somebody and having to look back. An hour now in the dark, neither of them had moved to leave. I don't know how to do this, Ethan admitted, and his voice was small in a way she'd never heard from him. I want to be honest with you the way you've been honest with me. I don't know how to date. I don't know how to want something without feeling guilty. I've got a daughter who's already lost one person she loved, and I am terrified of introducing anyone into her life who might become a second empty chair. I am a mess, Olivia. You've been loving a man through a window for 3 years, and I need you to know the man up close is a mess. Olivia laughed. Really laughed, the first full clean laugh of the whole night, and it startled a laugh out of him too. Ethan, she said, wiping her eyes. I kept a stranger's garage key for 2 years because I was too lonely to give it back. I photographed your family through a window. I have a box. You are talking to the world champion of being a mess. If you think being a mess disqualifies you, you have picked the wrong woman to confess it to. And that broke something loose in both of them. The tension, the fear, the years of it, and they sat on the old bench in the dark and laughed until it turned into something quieter. And then they were just sitting there, close, 2 messes, 3 houses apart, who had finally, after all this time, ended up on the same bench. Come to the house Saturday, Ethan said. Give Lily her card. 3 years late. Better late than never. Saturday. Olivia agreed. And Olivia. He picked up the nearly empty box and set it in her lap and folded her hands around it, secrets and all. The next time you want something, don't keep it in a box. Don't take a photograph through a window. Don't keep a key. Just knock on the door. It's 3 houses. I'll always answer. She looked down at the box, then up at him, and in the dark, he could just make out her face, and it was doing something he hadn't seen it do in the entire time he'd known her. It was hoping. I've got one more thing to confess, she said. We're way past confessions being scary. When I wrote that note yesterday, she said, and I picked the boathouse and I said 7 o'clock, come alone. I told myself it was so we'd have privacy. So I could show you the box without the whole neighborhood watching. She bit her lip. That's not the real reason. What's the real reason? 3 years ago, Olivia said quietly. The day I couldn't deliver Lily's card, I didn't go straight home. I drove out here, to this boathouse, because it was the one place nobody would see me fall apart. And I sat right here on this exact bench and I made myself a promise. I said, Olivia, if you ever get brave, if you ever stop being invisible, if you ever decide to reach for one thing before you die, you come back here. You come back to this bench where you cried about being a coward, and you do the brave thing right here, so the 2 of them are in the same place. She looked at him. So it wouldn't be the boathouse where I gave up. It'd be the boathouse where I finally didn't. Ethan looked around at the old weathered building, the dark water, the bench beneath them, seeing it new. You've been carrying that for 3 years too, he said. I told you, Olivia whispered. We've been living the same life, in 2 different houses. You're just finding out tonight. And there on the bench, where a lonely woman had once promised herself she'd someday be brave, Ethan Carter took Olivia Bennett's hand in the dark, not as a thank you, not as a kindness, not as a neighbor, and held it because he wanted to. Because for the first time in 4 years, he wanted something, and he was done pretending he didn't. Neither of them said anything for a long time. They didn't need to. The box was open, the seals were broken. The words were finally out of the dark and into the air between two people who had spent far too long carrying them alone. And 3 houses away, in a warm, bright house, a little girl, who did not yet know that her life was about to get bigger, sat on the couch beside her aunt, watching a movie waiting for her father to come home from the thing he'd promised was boring. The story we're writing has taken a heavier turn than it might look on the surface. Part 2 gave Olivia a history of mental illness in her family, and a moment 3 years ago where she sat in a cold house doing the math about whether anyone would notice. That's woven into the fiction, and I want to be thoughtful about how it carries forward. I can keep writing this story, and Part 3 can absolutely deal with the emotional aftermath of what Olivia confessed. That's where the real drama lives now. What I'll do is handle her mental health history the way the best storytelling does, with honesty and hope, showing recovery and connection as the through line without turning her lowest moment into anything the story treats as a solution or dwells on as method. Ethan showing up Lily's card, the neighborhood pulling closer. Those are the beats that matter. Here's Part 3. Saturday came slower than any 3 days of Ethan Carter's life. He hadn't told Lily. That was the first problem, and it sat on him all week like a stone. He'd come home Wednesday night from the boathouse, and Carol had taken one look at his face, and known, of course, she'd been reading that family's faces for 20 years, and she'd walked out to her car without a word, and just squeezed his arm on the way, hard, the way you squeeze someone when there aren't words yet. But Lily didn't know. Lily only knew that Daddy had come home from his boring thing, looking like he'd been crying, and had hugged her too long, and had said when she asked if the thing was boring after all. No bug. It turned out it wasn't boring at all. Now it was Saturday morning, and Olivia was coming at 11, and Ethan still hadn't figured out how to explain to an 8-year-old that the sad lady with the garden was coming over to give her a birthday card 3 years late. "Dad, you're doing the weird thing." He looked up. Lily was at the kitchen table in her soccer clothes, cleats already on, even though practice wasn't till the afternoon, watching him wipe down a counter that was already clean. "What weird thing?" "The cleaning thing. You do it when you're nervous." She said it matter-of-factly, the way she said most things, and it stopped him cold. 8 years old, and she was reading him the way Sarah used to. "You did it before my parent-teacher meeting, and before we went to the doctor about my ears. Are we going to the doctor?" "We're not going to the doctor." "Then why are you nervous?" 10 in the morning, 1 hour to go. He set down the rag and pulled out the chair across from her, and sat, and Lily watched him with those serious brown eyes, and he thought, there's no clean way to do this, so just do it plain. "You know the lady down the street," he said. "Miss Olivia, the one with the garden, the blue house. The one who's always sad." "Yeah, her." He folded his hands on the table. "She's coming over this morning, to see you. She's got something she wants to give you." Lily's whole face lit with the pure, uncomplicated interest of a kid hearing the word give. "A present?" "Sort of. It's a card." He picked his words carefully. "It's a birthday card, actually. She made it for you a long time ago, when you turned 5. Lily frowned, doing the math. "That was 3 birthdays ago. That's really late." "It is really late," Ethan agreed. "And there's a reason it's late, and I'm going to let her tell you the reason herself, because it's her reason to tell. But I want you to do something for me, okay? When she gives you the card, and when she talks to you, I want you to be gentle with her. Real gentle. Gentler than you'd be with anybody. Can you do that?" "Why?" And there it was. The question. 10:05, and his daughter looking up at him, wanting to know why she had to be gentle with the sad lady from down the street, and Ethan Carter had to decide right there at the kitchen table how much of the truth an 8-year-old could carry. "Because," he said slowly, Some people have had a harder time than you can see from the outside. Miss Olivia has been lonely for a long time, longer than anybody knew. And doing this, coming over here, talking to you, it's really, really brave for her. Braver than it looks. And when somebody does a brave thing, the kindest thing you can do is make it easy for them. You understand. Lily considered this with the total seriousness she brought to important matters. Like when Maddie was scared to go off the diving board and I climbed up with her so she wasn't alone. Ethan felt his throat go tight. Exactly like that bug. Exactly like that. Okay, Lily said, and hopped down from her chair satisfied. I'll be gentle. Can I wear my nice dress? You want to wear your nice dress? If it's brave for her, then it's important, Lily said with the flawless logic of a child. And you wear your nice dress for important things. And she padded off down the hall to change cleats clacking on the floor, and Ethan sat alone at the kitchen table and put his face in his hands for a second. Not because he was sad, but because his daughter had just understood in 30 seconds something it had taken him 4 years to relearn. 10:40, 20 minutes. He made coffee he wouldn't drink. 10:50, 10 minutes. Lily came back out in the good dress, the navy one with the little white collar that she'd worn to her cousin's baptism. And she'd tried to do her own hair and gotten it about 60% right, and Ethan fixed the rest without saying anything about the 40%. 10:58, 2 minutes. And Ethan realized his own hands were shaking, and he thought about a woman 3 houses down who had probably been awake since dawn, who had probably changed her outfit 4 times, who was probably standing at her own kitchen window right now, looking at his house, the way she'd looked at it for years. Except this time, she'd have to actually cross the yard. 11 o'clock came, and went. 11:02. 11:04. She's late, Lily observed. She'll come. But 11:06 ticked past, and 11:08, and something cold started to move in Ethan's stomach. He knew this woman now, or was starting to. He knew what she did when she got to the edge of the brave thing. She turned around. She'd told him herself she'd gotten all the way to his gate with the card 3 years ago, and turned around. She'd gotten all the way to his driveway with the key, and kept it instead. Olivia Bennett's whole life was a museum of moments where she'd made it to the very edge and then walked home. 11:11. He stood up. Where are you going? Lily asked. To make sure Miss Olivia's okay. He went to the front window and looked down the street toward the blue house, and his heart dropped because there she was, not on his walk, not crossing the yard, but standing on her own porch. Just standing there. A small figure, in a nice dress, with something held to her chest, frozen at the top of her own steps. 3 houses away, unable to take the first one. Ethan didn't grab his shoes. He went out the door in his socks. He didn't running would scare her, but he walked fast down the sidewalk in his socks on a Saturday morning, and as he got closer, he could see her face, and she'd been crying, and she saw him coming, and her hand came up to her mouth. I couldn't, she said when he got close enough to hear. Her voice was wrecked. Ethan, I got dressed and I got the card and I got all the way out here, and I've been standing on this porch for 15 minutes and I cannot make my feet move. It's 3 houses. It's 100 yards. And I can't, every time I lift my foot, I hear all the reasons she won't remember me. I'll make it weird. I'll make her sad. I'll ruin her Saturday. What kind of woman shows up 3 years late? Olivia, I told you I'd be brave and I can't even walk down a sidewalk. Olivia? He was on her steps now and he took her by the shoulders gently and made her look at him. Do you remember what you told me at the boathouse? About the promise you made yourself out there? That if you ever got brave, you'd do it in the same place you gave up, so it wouldn't be the place you gave up anymore. She nodded miserable. This is that, right now, this porch. He held her eyes. This is the porch where you've stood 100 times watching my house and wishing you were brave enough to cross. So let's make it the porch where you finally did. Not the one where you turned around again. You don't have to walk it alone. I'll walk every step with you. But you have to take the first one yourself because it's yours. I can't take it for you. He let go of her shoulders and held out his hand. 1 step, that's all. Just get off the porch. I'll be right here the whole way. 11:14. Olivia looked at his hand. She looked down the street at his house where a little girl in a navy dress was waiting. And Ethan watched her fight the single hardest fight of her life right there on her own front steps, the fight against 31 years of turning around. She took the step. Her foot came down on the walk, and she made a small sound like something tearing loose. And then she took another, and she gripped his hand so hard it hurt, and the two of them walked down the sidewalk together in the Saturday morning sun. A woman in a nice dress and a man in his socks 100 yards that she'd been trying to cross for 3 years. Halfway there she stopped. What if she asks why I'm sad all the time? Kids ask that. What do I say? You tell her the truth, in kid-sized pieces. She can handle more than you think. He squeezed her hand. Keep walking. 11:16. They reached his walk, his gate. The exact gate she'd turned around at 3 years ago. Olivia stopped again, and Ethan felt her whole body go rigid, and he knew this was it. This was the spot. This was the ghost. This is the gate, she whispered. I know. I got right here, 3 years ago. Right here, and I know, Ethan said. And this time, you're not going to. Look up. She looked up, and the front door was open, and standing in the doorway in a navy dress with a crooked collar was Lily, who had gotten impatient waiting and come to look, and who was now staring at the sad lady from down the street, standing at the gate holding her daddy's hand. For a long moment nobody moved. Nobody. Then Lily, 8 years old and gentle as she'd promised, called out across the yard in a clear, bright voice. Are you Miss Olivia? My dad said you were coming. I wore my nice dress because he said it was important. And Ethan watched something happen to Olivia Bennett that he would remember for the rest of his life. He watched every reason she'd ever had to turn around simply stop mattering. He felt her hand loosen in his. He watched her stand up a little straighter, and he watched her walk through the gate she'd fled 3 years ago all on her own, now not needing his hand anymore, drawn forward by a little girl in a navy dress who had just told her that her visit was important enough to dress up for. I'm Miss Olivia, she said, and her voice only shook a little. And you must be Lily. You've gotten so big. You knew me when I was little. I did, Olivia said. I've known you a long time, longer than you know. 11:18. They went inside. Ethan hung back for a second at the door, watching them. This woman and this child circling each other in his living room with the careful curiosity of two people who somehow already knew they mattered to each other and hadn't figured out how yet. Lily showed Olivia her soccer trophy. Olivia asked all the right questions about it. And Ethan stood in his own doorway and thought, this is either going to be the best thing that ever happened to this house, or it's going to break my heart, and there's no way to know which without letting it happen. He made coffee, then this time he actually drank. He let them find their own rhythm. And after a while, when the newness had worn off and Lily had shown Olivia approximately every object she owned, Olivia glanced over at Ethan, a question in her eyes, and he gave her the smallest nod. Now. Do it now, before you lose your nerve. Lily, Olivia said, and she sat down on the couch so she'd be at the girl's level, and she took the card out of her bag. I have something for you. I told your dad I wanted to give it to you myself. Is it okay if I give it to you? Lily nodded wide-eyed and climbed up onto the couch beside her. When you turned 5. Olivia said you had a birthday party. In the backyard. I could hear it from my house. Her hands were trembling around the envelope. And I made you this card, because it was your first birthday after your mom went to heaven, and I thought somebody should tell you some things. But I was Lily. I have to be honest with you because your dad says you can handle the truth, and I think he's right. She took a breath. I was too scared to give it to you. I got all the way to your gate 3 years ago, and I was too scared, and I took it home, and I kept it in a box, and I've felt bad about it every single day since. So it's very, very late, and I'm sorry it's late, but here it is. She held out the envelope, and Lily, gentle, as she'd promised her father, didn't grab it. She looked at it, and then she looked at Olivia's shaking hands, and then Ethan's heart nearly stopped. She reached out, not for the card, but for Olivia's hand, and she held it in both of hers, the way she'd held Maddie's on the diving board. "It's okay," Lily said. "You don't have to be scared, it's just me." 11:31. And Olivia Bennet, who had held herself together through the boathouse, and the box, and the walk down the street, came completely apart on Ethan Carter's couch, undone by 4 words from an 8-year-old. "It's just me." She pressed her free hand to her face, and her shoulders shook, and Lily, alarmed, looked to her father. "Did I do it wrong?" And Ethan crossed the room and knelt down by the couch and put a hand on his daughter's back. "You didn't do anything wrong, Bug," he said softly. Sometimes people cry because something is so kind it fills them all the way up. That's a good cry. That's the best kind. "Is that a good cry, Miss Olivia?" Lily asked, worried. "It's the best cry I've had in my whole life." Olivia managed, laughing and crying at once, and Lily seemed satisfied by this and settled back against the couch cushions, still holding her hand. "Do you want me to open the card now?" "Yes, please. Open it." Lily opened the envelope carefully, the way she opened important things, and she pulled out the card with the cartoon cake and 5 candles, and she opened it, and she looked at all the writing inside, and her face fell. "There's a lot of words," she said. "I'm only in 2nd grade. I can read, but not fast." "Would you like me to read it to you?" Olivia asked. "Can Daddy read it? He does the voices." And Ethan, still kneeling by the couch, took the card from his daughter's hands, and for the 2nd time in a week, he read Olivia's words out loud, but this time not in a dark boathouse to the woman who wrote them. This time in a bright living room to the little girl they were written for. "Dear Lily," he read, and his voice was steady because he made it be steady. "You don't know me very well. I'm the lady from the blue house down the street, the one with the messy garden." Lily giggled. "Her garden's not messy. It's the prettiest one." "It wasn't always," Olivia said. 3 years ago it was messy. It got prettier." Ethan kept reading. "I wanted to tell you happy birthday, and I wanted to tell you one other thing because I think somebody should. I lost my mom too." Lily went very still. "Not the same way you lost yours." Ethan read, "But I know a little about what it's like to grow up with an empty chair." He glanced at his daughter. She was listening now with her whole body, the way kids listen when someone is finally saying the true thing nobody says. "And I want you to know something that took me a very long time to learn. The love doesn't leave. It just changes shape." 11:40. The room had gone quiet enough to hear the clock. "Your mom's love didn't go anywhere," Ethan read, and his voice caught just slightly, and he pushed through it because his daughter needed to hear it more than he needed to protect himself from it. "It's in your dad, who I watch take such good care of you. It's in the way people in this neighborhood look out for you, even the quiet ones you don't notice. Love is all around you, Lily, standing a little closer than you think. You just have to be brave enough to see it. Happy birthday, sweet girl. From your neighbor who sees you." He lowered the card. Lily was quiet for a long time, longer than Ethan expected. She sat on the couch between the 2 adults with the card in her lap, and she looked at it, and her small face was working through something enormous, and neither Ethan nor Olivia dared to speak. Then she looked up at Olivia. "Is that true?" she asked. "That the love doesn't leave because Bobby Peterson at school said when you're dead you're just gone and that's it. He said it at recess, and it made me feel bad in my stomach for 3 days." And Ethan watched Olivia Bennet gather herself and give his daughter the answer he had never been able to find. "Bobby Peterson is right about one thing," Olivia said gently. "Your mom's body is gone. That part's true, and it's okay to be sad about it. It's okay to be sad about it forever a little. But Bobby's wrong about the rest. Because love isn't in a body, Lily. Love is a thing that gets made, and once it's made, it doesn't unmake. Your mom made a whole ocean of it just for you, and an ocean doesn't disappear. It just spreads out. It goes into everybody who loves you now. So every time your dad tucks you in the tight way, that's some of your mom's love coming to you through him." Every time somebody in this neighborhood waves at you, or looks out for you, or bakes you something, that's some of it too. It found new ways to reach you. That's what I mean when I say it changes shape. She reached out and gently touched the card in Lily's lap. You're not living with an empty chair, sweetheart. You're living inside an ocean. You just couldn't see it yet. That's the only thing that was ever wrong. Not that the love left, just that nobody showed you where it went. 11:44. Ethan Carter had to look away out the window and blink hard because his daughter had just gotten in 90 seconds from a woman she'd met an hour ago. The healing he had failed to give her for 3 years. And instead of being jealous of that, instead of feeling like a failure, he felt something crack open in his chest that felt for the first time in 4 years like gratitude. Lily was nodding slowly, turning it over in her second-grade mind. So Mommy's love is like the ocean, and it goes into people. That's right. And you knew that. And you wrote it down. 3 years ago. Lily's brow furrowed. But you didn't give it to me. You kept it in a box for 3 years. I did. Olivia admitted, bracing herself. And I'm so sorry, Lily. That was wrong of me. You needed those words 3 years ago, and I was too scared to. That's okay, Lily said simply. Olivia blinked. It is. You gave it to me now. Lily shrugged with the devastating clarity children have about things adults tangle themselves in knots over. Bobby only made me feel bad last week, so I needed it more now than then probably. So it's good you waited. She thought about it. Also, you were scared. Dad said to be gentle because you were being brave, and brave means you're scared but you do it anyway. So you did a brave thing. You just did it slow. 11:47. And Ethan watched 3 years of guilt lift off Olivia Bennett's shoulders, dismantled in 20 seconds by an 8-year-old who had decided with total authority that a card 3 years late had actually arrived exactly on time. You did a brave thing, Olivia repeated softly. You just did it slow. She let out a breath that seemed to come from somewhere very deep. You know what, Lily, I'm going to remember that for the rest of my life. You can keep it, Lily offered generously. Like how you keep things in your box. You can keep, you did a brave thing, you just did it slow in your box. I will, Olivia said. I absolutely will. Lily, having resolved the emotional business of the morning to her own satisfaction, moved immediately to the next order of business the way children do. Do you want to see my room? I have a fish. His name is Waffle. I would love to meet Waffle. And just like that, the heaviest conversation of the morning was over, and an 8-year-old was dragging a 31-year-old woman down the hall to meet a goldfish named Waffle, and Ethan sat on the arm of his couch and listened to the two of them. His daughter's bright chatter, Olivia's soft laughter answering it coming from down the hall, and he thought, this is what the house is supposed to sound like. He hadn't known that was a sound the house was missing until he heard it fill in. 12:10. They came back from Waffle's room. Lily was now firmly attached to Olivia's side and narrating a complex story about her fish's personality, and Olivia was nodding along like it was the most important information she'd ever received. And Ethan made lunch grilled cheese and tomato soup because it was the only thing all three of them turned out to like, and the three of them ate at the kitchen table, and it was... Ethan kept waiting for it to feel wrong, to feel like a betrayal, to feel like Sarah's chair was being sat in by a stranger. It didn't. It felt like the table had been set for 4 years, and someone had finally noticed there was a third seat. Miss Olivia, Lily said around a mouthful of grilled cheese. Why were you sad for so long? Dad said you were lonely. What's lonely feel like? Lily, Ethan said. Chew your food. It's okay, Olivia said. She set down her spoon and thought about how to say it. Lonely feels like you know when you're at a party and everybody's having fun, but you're standing a little bit outside of it, and you can see it, but you can't figure out how to get in, like there's a window between you and everybody else. Lily nodded seriously. That happened to me at Emma's party. I didn't know anybody and I stood by the snacks. Exactly like that, Olivia said. Except for me, it lasted a really long time. Years. I stood by the snacks for years. She smiled, but it was a real smile now, not a sad one. I looked at people having families and being happy, and I couldn't figure out how to get in. So I just watched through the window. That's really sad, Lily said. It was, but you know what fixed it? What? Olivia looked across the table at Ethan and then back at his daughter. Your dad, a long time ago in the middle of winter, when I was standing by the snacks feeling like I'd never get in. He came and stood by the snacks with me. He didn't even know he was doing it. He just noticed somebody was alone, and he came over. Her voice went thick. And it turns out that's the whole secret, Lily. That's the whole entire secret to fixing lonely. Somebody just has to notice you're by the snacks and come stand with you. That's it. That's all it ever was. 12:22. Lily absorbed this, then turned to her father with an expression of mild accusation. Dad, why didn't you tell me Miss Olivia was standing by the snacks? I would have gone and stood with her. I'm good at that. I did it for Maddie on the diving board. And Ethan Carter, caught completely off guard, laughed a real deep, helpless laugh that he felt in his whole chest, and across the table Olivia laughed too, and Lily looked back and forth between the two laughing adults with the faint exasperation of a child who has said something perfectly sensible and doesn't understand why the grown-ups find it funny. You're right, Bug, Ethan said when he could talk again. I should have. I'm sorry. I didn't notice for a long time either. I guess I was standing by the snacks too and didn't know it. Then you should both go stand in the middle of the party, Lily declared. Instead of by the snacks, together. That's what I would do. And she went back to her grilled cheese business, concluded, having just delivered, without the faintest idea she'd done it the entire thesis of both their lives. Ethan looked at Olivia over his daughter's head. Olivia looked back at him. Neither of them said anything, but something passed between them, warm and terrifying and full, and they both looked away at the same time, because it was still too much, but a little less too much than it had been at the boathouse. A little more like something they might survive. 12:40. After lunch, Lily had soccer practice, and there was a scramble to find the second shin guard, which had migrated under the couch as shin guards do, and Olivia helped look for it on her knees on the living room floor, beside an 8-year-old. And when she found it under the couch, Lily whooped like they'd struck gold, and Ethan stood watching a woman he'd barely known a week ago crawling around his living room floor with his daughter, both of them triumphant over a lost piece of sporting equipment. And he thought, how did I have all of this 3 houses away and never know it? They drove Lily to practice together. That hadn't been the plan. There hadn't been a plan, but it just happened. Olivia lingering, no one wanting to end the morning, and then all 3 of them in Ethan's car, Lily in the back seat with her cleats, Olivia in the passenger seat where nobody had sat in 4 years. She noticed. Ethan saw her notice. She ran her hand very lightly over the seat and looked out the window and didn't say anything, and Ethan understood she was thinking about the passenger seat and who used to sit there, and he was thinking about it too, and it was okay. It was allowed to be both things at once. Sad and good. An ending and a beginning riding in the same car. 1 o'clock. At the soccer field, Lily ran off to her team and then stopped and ran back and threw her arms around Olivia's waist in a fierce, quick hug that clearly startled the woman down to her shoes. Bye, Miss Olivia. Thank you for my card. Come back and see Waffle again. And then she was gone, sprinting toward a cluster of 8-year-olds in mismatched jerseys, already yelling about who was on whose team. Olivia stood at the edge of the soccer field, with her hand pressed to the place where the little girl had hugged her, and she didn't say anything, and Ethan saw that she was crying again, quietly watching Lily play. You okay? He asked. 3 years ago, Olivia said, not taking her eyes off the field. I sat in a cold house in the dark, and I genuinely believed that no one in the world would notice if I was gone, that I didn't have a single person who'd be worse off. Her voice was steady and wondering all at once. And a little girl just hugged me and told me to come back and see her fish. Ethan, I don't do you understand what that 3 years ago I thought I had nobody. And now there's an 8-year-old who wants me to come back. 104. Ethan Carter stood beside her at the edge of the soccer field, and he thought about how close the world had come to not having Olivia Bennet in it. This woman, his daughter, had just hugged this woman who had written the truest thing anyone had ever said about his dead wife's love, and something fierce and protective rose up in him. "Listen to me," he said, and he turned her gently by the shoulders to face him away from the field. "I need to say something, and I need you to actually hear it. Not make it small. Not turn away from it. Look at me." She looked at him. "You have people now. You hear me. You are not standing by the snacks anymore. You've got a little girl who wants you to meet her fish. You've got me. Whatever this is between us, however slow we have to take it, you are not alone anymore, and you are never going back to that cold house in the dark again. Because if it ever gets that heavy for you again, you don't do the math by yourself. You knock on my door, 3 houses, day or night. You promise me that right now." Olivia's eyes were streaming. "Ethan, promise me, I mean it. I lost one person I loved to a phone call on the interstate with no warning at all. I will not lose another one to silence. Not when the silence is the one thing we can actually fix. You promise me that if it ever gets dark like that again, you come find me, and you say it out loud, and you let me stand by the snacks with you. Promise me." And Olivia Bennet, who had spent 31 years being invisible, who had made herself so small she nearly disappeared for good, looked up at a man who had crossed 2 frozen yards for her once, and was now refusing to let her carry the dark alone, and she said the bravest word of her entire life. "I promise." 109. He pulled her into a hug, then right there at the edge of the soccer field, with the parents and the folding chairs, and the 8-year-old swarming a ball in the middle distance, and she held on to him like the rope he'd once been across 2 frozen yards, and Ethan held her, and watched his daughter play over the top of her head, and thought I came to that boathouse 3 days ago, braced for the worst news of my life. And instead I got handed a second chance I didn't even know I was allowed to want. They stood like that for a while. Then Olivia pulled back and wiped her face and let out a shaky laugh. "I'm getting your shirt all wet. I've cried more in the last 3 days than in the last 3 years. "Carol says that's good," Ethan said. "The crying. She says the ones who don't cry are the ones you worry about. She'd know. She's been trying to make me cry for 4 years. "Did she succeed?" "Wednesday night, at the boathouse. First time." He looked at her. "You did what 4 years of Carol couldn't." 115. They watched the practice together, standing close but not touching. Now 2 people learning the shape of a thing too new to have a name yet. And out on the field, Lily scored a goal, a real one, past the little goalie, and everything. And she spun around looking for her father in the crowd of parents. And she found him. And then her eyes moved one person over and found Olivia standing beside him. And her whole face broke into a grin, and she pointed at both of them and yelled, "Did you see it?" Across the entire field to both of them together, like they were a unit, like they were a set, like they were the 2 people you look for in the crowd. And Ethan and Olivia, standing side by side at the edge of the field, both raised their arms and cheered for her. At the same time, a father and the woman who might someday be more. And for one perfect suspended moment, none of the hard things mattered. Not the grief, not the darkness, not the 3 years lost to fear. There was only a little girl who'd scored a goal, looking into the crowd and finding not one person waiting for her, but 2. The soccer field emptied out slow, the way youth practices always do. Parents peeling off toward minivans, while a few kids kept kicking the ball around because nobody wanted to be the one to admit it was over. Ethan carried Lily's cleats. She'd wanted to keep them on for the ride home, and he'd let her, which meant they'd track grass all through the car, and he found he didn't care. Olivia walked on his other side, and Lily walked in the middle, and the 3 of them crossed the parking lot like that. And Ethan noticed people noticing. He knew half the parents on that field. He'd been the widower to them for 4 years, the one they were gentle with, the one they invited and expected to decline. And now, here he was walking to his car, with a woman on his other side and something on his face he hadn't worn in a long time, and he could feel the neighborhood recalibrating in real time. Denise saw them. She was there, of course, because her son played on the same team, and Ethan felt Olivia go rigid the moment she spotted her, felt the whole loose, easy morning tighten back up. "That's her," Olivia said under her breath. "That's Denise." "I know." "She's coming over here." She was. Cutting across the grass with a bright, wide smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and Ethan felt Lily's hand find his, and he squeezed it, and he thought, "Here we go." "Ethan Carter," Denise said, arriving in a cloud of perfume and cheer. "2 barbecues in a row, and now the soccer field people are going to think you've got a social life." Her eyes flicked to Olivia quick, and assessing the way one woman sizes up another. "And you brought... I'm sorry, I don't think we've met." "Are you a new neighbor?" "Not new," Olivia said quietly. "I've lived 3 houses down from Ethan for 6 years." 2 seconds of silence. Ethan watched it land. Watched Denise recalculate. Watched the smile flicker as she tried to place this woman she'd apparently never once noticed in 6 years. This woman who had been standing 3 houses down the whole time. "Oh, of course. The blue house." Denise recovered. "With the garden. I've admired that garden." "Thank you," Olivia said. And then Denise did the thing. She turned her whole body toward Ethan, angling Olivia out of the conversation, with the smooth, practiced ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. And she put her hand on his arm, the same move from the barbecue, the one Olivia had described. And now Ethan felt it the way Olivia must have felt watching it, and she said, "Listen, I've been meaning to catch you. I've got a client looking in your neighborhood, and honestly, Ethan, with just you and Lily in that big house, have you ever thought about Denise?" Ethan didn't move his arm, but his voice changed, and it stopped her. "I want to introduce you to Olivia properly because I don't think you got it the first time. This is Olivia Bennett. She's the most important person in this neighborhood to me and my daughter, and she has been for a lot longer than either of us realized. So..." He put his free hand over Denise's gently and lifted it off his arm and set it back at her side, and it was the politest possible way to do a very clear thing. "I'd love for you two to actually know each other." 2:15. Ethan watched Denise's face go through several things at once, surprise, a flash of something sharper, and then to her credit, a kind of rueful acceptance. She was a lot of things, Denise, but she wasn't stupid. She looked at Olivia, really looked at her this time, and then she looked at Lily holding Ethan's hand, and then she looked at the whole picture of it. The 3 of them, the unit, and Ethan saw her understand. "Well," Denise said, and the brightness that came back into her voice was different now, more genuine for having dropped the campaign. "Olivia, it is nice to properly meet you. That garden really is something." She gave a little laugh at herself this time. "I clearly need to pay better attention to my neighbors. 6 years. Goodness." She glanced at Ethan, and there was no hardness in it. "Lucky man." "I know it," Ethan said, and Denise nodded and gathered up her son and left, and that was it. No scene, no cruelty. Just a woman who'd been circling something, recognizing it was already spoken for, and having the grace to bow out. But for Olivia, Ethan understood it was enormous. It was the ghost from the barbecue, the very reason she'd written the note, the fear that had finally driven her out of 3 years of silence, and she'd stood right next to it, and it had turned out to be a woman who admired her garden. They got to the car. Lily climbed in the back, and before Olivia opened her door, she stood there for a second, hand on the handle, and let out a long breath. "That was her," she said. "That was the whole reason. That woman right there. That's who I've been terrified of for a week. And she just admired my garden and left." She did. "I built a mountain out of her," Olivia said wonderingly. "I lay awake terrified of her. I wrote you a note because of her. And she's just a lady who sells houses and didn't notice me for 6 years." She shook her head. "How much of my life have I spent terrified of things that turned out to admire my garden?" 2:22. Ethan didn't answer that because it didn't need answering and because it was maybe the truest thing she'd said all day. They drove home. Lily fell asleep in the back before they were out of the parking lot, the way kids do after they've run around for 2 hours, cleats still on, mouth open, dead to the world. And in the quiet of the car with the sleeping child behind them, Ethan and Olivia talked in the low voices you use around a sleeping kid, and it was the first time they'd really talked without a box or a card or a soccer game between them, just two adults in a car. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said. "And you can tell me it's none of my business." "After everything I've told you, I don't think there's a none of your business left." "The what you told me?" "At the boathouse. About your mother. About it being in you too." He kept his eyes on the road, gave her the privacy of not being looked at. "You said you take care of it now. I want to understand what that means. Not because I'm scared of it. Because I want to know I want to know what you need. If we're going to do this, whatever this is, I want to do it with my eyes open." Olivia was quiet for a moment. "It means I see somebody," she said finally. "A therapist. Wednesday afternoons, which is why I couldn't do the boathouse until the evening, actually. It means I take a medication, and I don't skip it. Not ever. I learned that lesson the hard way. It means I have my therapist calls it a safety plan. Things I do when it gets heavy. People I'm supposed to call." She let out a small breath. "For a long time, the list of people I was supposed to call was just the crisis line. Because I didn't have anybody else on it. That's a real thing that was real about my life. My emergency contact was a phone number for strangers. 2:30. Ethan's hands tightened on the wheel. "After the ice storm." Olivia went on. "After you pulled me out of that, I got help, that winter. It was the bottom, and sometimes you have to hit the bottom to push off it. I called the number, and then I got a real doctor, and I did the work. I've done 3 years of work, Ethan. I'm not the woman who was sitting in that cold house anymore. I want you to know that. I didn't come to that boathouse as somebody who needs saving. I came as somebody who saved herself and just wanted for once to not have to do the next part alone." She looked over at him. "There's a difference. It matters to me that you know the difference." "I hear it," Ethan said. "I hear the difference." "Good. But I'm still on the list now," he said. "Me and Lily. We go on the list, above the crisis line. That's not me thinking you can't handle it. That's just me wanting to be on the list." And Olivia turned to look out the window so he wouldn't see her face, and said in a voice that was barely holding, "Yeah, okay, you're on the list." 2:34. They pulled into the driveway. Lily didn't wake, so Ethan carried her in cleats and all, and laid her on the couch and pulled the throw blanket over her, and Olivia stood in the doorway, watching him do it, with an expression he was starting to be able to read. Now she was filing it away, the way she filed everything, another entry for a box she didn't need anymore. "You don't have to keep them in a box now," he said quietly, catching her at it. "The moments. You're in them now. You don't have to watch through the window and save them for later. You can just be in the room." "I know," she said. "I'm working on it. 31 years is a lot of habit." They let Lily sleep. They sat at the kitchen table with coffee, and the afternoon stretched out, and it was easy in a way that surprised both of them. And at some point, Olivia looked around the kitchen, and her eyes landed on the shelf on the photograph of Sarah that had watched Ethan tape a torn note back together 4 nights ago. "That's her," Olivia said. It wasn't a question. "That's Sarah." Olivia got up and went to the shelf and looked at the picture for a long time. And Ethan let her and braced himself a little, because this was the thing, wasn't it? This was the reef the whole thing could wreck itself on. "She's beautiful," Olivia said. "Lily has her nose. Everybody says that. Can I ask you something now?" Olivia turned around. "And you can tell me it's none of my business." "Fair's fair." "Are you sure?" she asked. "About this, about me. Because I need to ask it once out loud, and then I'll never ask it again, but I have to ask it once." Her hands were knotted together. "I know what it's like to be somebody's second choice, Ethan. My whole life I was the daughter who wasn't enough to stay for. And I could not survive being the woman you settled for because you were lonely, and I was there and I made it easy by throwing a box of my whole heart at your feet. I'd rather go back to the blue house alone, I mean that. So I have to ask, am I somebody you actually want? Or am I just the person who finally knocked 241? And Ethan Carter understood that this was the real question, the one under all the other questions. the one this whole brave, terrifying week had been building toward. He got up from the table. He walked over to the shelf and he stood next to Olivia in front of the photograph of his dead wife, and he looked at Sarah's face. And then he looked at Olivia's, and he said the thing he'd been circling for 4 years without ever landing on it. "I loved Sarah with everything I had," he said. "I'm not going to pretend I didn't, and I'm not going to make it smaller to make you feel better because you told me at the boathouse you didn't want a made-up version of me either. I loved her. When she died, I thought that was it. I thought I'd used it all up. I thought a man gets one of those, and I'd had mine." He kept his eyes on the photograph. "And then a woman I barely knew handed me a note, and I found out I was wrong. Not that I love Sarah less. That's not how it works. You taught my daughter that this morning, remember. The love doesn't leave, it changes shape. Sarah's not less because you're here. She's the reason I know how to do this. She taught me how to love somebody. And now there's somebody new to love, and I know how because of her." Olivia had gone very still. "So no," Ethan said, and he turned to face her fully. "You're not my second choice. You're not the person who happened to knock. You want to know the truth. The reason I couldn't sleep after you gave me that note wasn't fear. I told myself it was fear all night. It wasn't. It was that some part of me that I thought died 4 years ago sat up and said, finally. Like it had been waiting. Like it knew something I didn't." He reached out and took her hand. "You didn't fall into an empty life and fill a hole, Olivia. You walked up to a locked door and you knocked, and it turned out I'd been standing on the other side of it for 4 years, hoping somebody would." 246. Olivia Bennett looked up at him with her whole heart in her face. The last wall in her coming down. The way the last wall in him had come down at the boathouse. And she didn't say anything, because there wasn't anything left to say. And Ethan reached up and brushed a tear off her cheek with his thumb, and for a moment, they just stood there in front of Sarah's photograph, the living and the loved, all of it somehow holding. "Okay," Olivia whispered. "Okay. I believe you." She let out a wet laugh. "I asked it once. I'm never asking it again." "Good, because the answer's not going to change." And he might have kissed her. Then it was right there, the moment was right there, except that a small voice from the couch said, "Are you two gonna kiss?" They sprang apart like teenagers. Lily was awake, propped up on one elbow under the throw blanket, watching them with the frank, unembarrassed interest of a child who has just woken up to find the adults doing something interesting. "Because Maddie's parents kiss in the kitchen all the time," Lily continued. "And Maddie says it's gross, but I think it's nice. It means they like each other. Do you like each other?" 250. Ethan felt his face go hot. Olivia's had gone crimson. And there was a beat where the whole thing hung in the balance, where it could have gotten awkward, where a lesser moment would have fumbled it. And then Ethan looked at his daughter. This kid who'd handled everything today with more grace than most adults, and he decided she'd earned the truth. "Yeah, Bug," he said. "We like each other." Lily nodded, deeply satisfied, as if a long-standing suspicion had finally been confirmed. "Good. I like her too. She's better than the snack lady from the field." And she flopped back down under the blanket, having settled the romantic future of the household, and added muffled, "You can kiss if you want. I'll close my eyes." And Olivia laughed so hard she had to sit down, and Ethan laughed with her, and the tension broke into 100 pieces, and the answer to, "Is this going to work?" seemed suddenly blindingly obvious in a way it hadn't a minute before. It was going to work. Not because it would be easy. Because a kid under a blanket had just offered to close her eyes. They didn't kiss. Not with Lily right there. But Ethan walked Olivia to the door an hour later when the afternoon had finally worn itself out, and on the porch, his porch, the one he'd fixed her matching version of once without being asked, he took both her hands. "Come for dinner tomorrow," he said. "Not a big thing, just us. Lily wants to make you her famous pasta, which is regular pasta, but she puts the cheese on herself, and it's a whole production. I would love Lily's famous pasta. And Olivia." He held on to her hands a second longer. "I meant what I said at the field, about the list, about knocking, 3 houses, anytime. I need you to actually use it, not just agree to it to make me feel better." "I will," she said. "I promise. And I don't make that promise lightly anymore. I know what it's worth now." 2:58. She walked home. And this time, Ethan stood on his porch and watched her go 100 yards down the sidewalk to the blue house. And it was the same 100 yards she'd been unable to cross that morning, and now she walked it easy. And halfway there, she turned around and waved, and he waved back. And it was such a small thing. A wave between two neighbors, except that it wasn't small at all. It was the whole world. The next weeks moved fast. Dinner. Sunday turned into dinner. Wednesday turned into Olivia's key on Ethan's counter, and Ethan's daughter drawing a family portrait in art class with 3 people in it. The neighborhood noticed. Of course it noticed. Casseroles that used to appear on Ethan's porch out of pity started appearing out of celebration. And old Mrs. Kellerman from the corner stopped Ethan at the mailbox to tell him she'd been rooting for that Bennett girl for years. Poor thing, always so alone. And it was about time somebody saw her. "You knew," Ethan asked, that she was lonely like that." "Honey," Mrs. Kellerman said, "the whole street knew she was lonely. We just didn't any of us know what to do about it. You don't with the quiet ones. You wave, you bring a casserole, you tell yourself you'll stop by sometime, and you never do." She patted his arm. "You were the only one who ever actually stopped by. The rest of us just felt bad from a distance. That's the difference between you and the rest of us, and it always was." 3:10. And Ethan carried that home and sat with it, this idea that a whole neighborhood had watched Olivia disappear and felt bad from a distance, and that the only thing that had ever been different about him was that he'd crossed the yard. Not that he was special, not that he was better, just that he'd crossed the yard. It made him think about how many other people were disappearing 3 houses down from somebody all over everywhere, waiting for one person to stop feeling bad from a distance and actually cross the yard. He started paying attention. He couldn't help it. He noticed the new widower 2 streets over who'd stopped coming to things. He noticed the kid at Lily's school whose parents never showed up. Olivia noticed him noticing. "You've caught it," she told him one night, teasing, but not entirely. "The thing. The crossing the yard thing. You can't unsee it once you see it." "You gave it to me." "I gave it to you," she agreed. "Consider it payment. For the soup." And one evening in early fall, maybe 6 weeks after the boathouse, Olivia showed up at Ethan's door, not for dinner, not for a scheduled thing, but just showed up, and she was crying. And Ethan's heart lurched, and Lily was already in bed, and he pulled Olivia inside and shut the door and said, "What is it? What happened? Are you okay?" "I'm okay," she said quickly. "I'm okay, I promise it's not that. I'm not, the list is fine. She wiped her face. "I had a bad afternoon. Not a dangerous one. Just a hard one. The kind where the old voice gets loud. And 3 years ago, 6 months ago, I would have sat in my house alone and white-knuckled through it, and it would have been the worst night of the month." She looked up at him. "And instead, I remembered you said, knock. 3 houses. Any time. And I stood in my kitchen for 20 minutes arguing with myself about whether it counted, whether it was bad enough to bother you, whether I was allowed. And then I thought about what I'd tell Lily. I'd tell Lily to come stand by the snacks with somebody. So I put on my shoes, and I walked over here, and I knocked. That's the whole thing. I just wanted to not be alone with it. And I actually did it. I actually knocked." 3:20. And Ethan Carter understood that this right here, a woman crying on his doorstep on an ordinary Tuesday because she'd had a hard afternoon and had chosen for the first time in her life not to be alone with it. This was bigger than the boathouse, bigger than the box, bigger than any of the grand moments. Because the grand moments were easy to be brave for. It was the ordinary Tuesday that killed you. It was the ordinary Tuesday she'd just learned to survive differently. "You knocked," he said, and pulled her into his arms. "You knocked. Do you know how proud of you I am? You knocked." "It felt so small," she said into his shoulder. "Just walking over. Just knocking." "It's not small. It's the least small thing there is." He held her at arm's length so she could see his face. You want to know something? The soup, the porch, the ice storm, all the things in your box, all the things you thanked me for. They were easy for me, Olivia. They cost me almost nothing. I'll be honest with you, because we don't do small anymore. Crossing a yard with soup is easy. What you just did, fighting the loudest voice you've got and choosing to knock instead of disappear, that's the hard version. That's the brave version. You just did the thing that's 100 times harder than anything in your box. He wiped her tears with his thumb. You didn't just learn to accept somebody crossing the yard for you. You learned to cross it yourself. That's everything. That's the whole game. 3:28. She stayed. He made tea. They sat on the couch and she came back to herself slowly the way people do, and the loud voice got quiet, and around midnight she said she was okay to go home, and he said she was welcome to stay, and she said no, going home was part of it. Going home, okay, was the thing she needed to prove to herself, and he understood, and he walked her to the door. Same time next crisis, she said, joking now herself again. Anytime. You know the address. 3 houses down. 3 houses down. And she walked home in the dark, and this time Ethan didn't worry watching her go, because he knew now that if the dark ever got too heavy, she wouldn't sit alone in it doing the math. She'd put on her shoes, she'd cross the yard, she'd knock. The months turned. Fall into winter, and Ethan found himself dreading the first ice storm, the way you dread an anniversary, because the last big one had nearly taken her. And he didn't say anything about it. But Olivia knew. Olivia always knew, and when the forecast finally called for freezing rain in December, she showed up at his door with an overnight bag and said, "I'm not spending this one alone in that house, not this one. I already talked to Lily. She's thrilled she's setting up the air mattress. I'm staying here till the ice melts and I don't want to argue about it." He didn't argue about it. 3:35. And that was how it happened, that when the ice storm came, the first bad one in 3 years, the ghost of the one that had nearly ended everything, Olivia Bennett spent it not alone in a cold, dark house doing the math, but on an air mattress in a warm, bright living room, playing card games by candlelight with an 8-year-old, while the man who'd once run an extension cord across 2 frozen yards to save her made grilled cheese on a camp stove, because it was the only thing all 3 of them liked. Lily fell asleep around 10 between them, and Ethan and Olivia sat in the candlelight listening to the ice tick against the windows, and Olivia said very quietly, 3 years ago tonight, almost exactly, I was sitting alone in the dark, doing the worst math of my life. And you came across the yard. She looked around the warm room, the sleeping child, the man beside her. And now the ice is coming down again, and I'm not doing math. I'm just here. Warm, not alone. I keep thinking about the version of me who sat in that cold house. I wish I could tell her. I wish I could tell her to just hold on 3 more years, because it gets so much better than you can possibly imagine. It gets this good. 3:40. Ethan reached over the sleeping child and took Olivia's hand. You don't have to tell her, he said. You already did. Every single time you put your shoes on and knocked instead of disappearing, you told her. You've been telling her for months. She heard you. He squeezed her hand. She's the reason you're sitting here. That woman in the cold house held on. That's the only reason any of this exists. So when you think about her, don't be sad for her. Be grateful to her. She's the bravest person in this story. She held on with nothing. We've got each other now. She had nothing, and she held on anyway. And Olivia Bennett cried then, but it was the best kind, the kind Lily had asked about, the kind that comes when something fills you all the way up. And she cried for the woman in the cold house, who had held on with nothing, and she cried in gratitude to her. And Ethan held her hand across their sleeping daughter, while the ice came down harmless against the windows of a warm and crowded house, and somewhere in the crying, it turned the way it does into something like peace. Show more. 1 year passed the way good years do, quietly, and all at once. The neighborhood barbecue came around again, same as always. The same folding tables, and the same coolers, and the same smell of somebody's charcoal getting away from them. And Ethan Carter stood at the edge of it, holding a paper plate. He wasn't eating from, watching the 2 people who made up his whole world move through the crowd. Lily was 9 now. She'd shot up over the summer all knees and elbows, and she'd appointed herself Olivia's official escort for the evening, dragging her from group to group, introducing her to people Olivia had lived near for 7 years, as though presenting a celebrity. "This is Miss Olivia. She's mine." "Not my dad's. Mine." Olivia let herself be dragged and laughed and knew everyone's name now, and it struck Ethan, standing there, that a year ago this same woman couldn't cross 100 yards of sidewalk, and now she was working a barbecue like she'd been born to it. Not because she'd become someone else. Because she'd finally let herself be the person she'd been underneath the whole time. "You've got that look again," Carol said, appearing at his elbow with a plate that was actually loaded with food, because Carol ate at barbecues like a woman with nothing to prove. "What look?" "The one you had a year ago, before the thing that turned out not to be boring." She followed his gaze across the yard to where Olivia was crouched down helping Lily's friend Maddie fix a shoelace. "Except last year it was scared. This year it's just full." She bumped his shoulder with hers. "Sarah would have liked her, you know. I've been wanting to say that for a while and never found the right minute. Sarah would have flat out loved her." Ethan's throat tightened. "Yeah, are you kidding? A woman who'd crawl around your living room floor looking for a shin guard and cry over a birthday card. That was Sarah's whole entire type of person. She collected people like that." Carol wiped at her eye quickly and pretended she hadn't. "You didn't replace my sister, Ethan. I watched you worry about that for 4 years. You didn't replace her. You found somebody Sarah would have picked out for you herself. And I think that's about the best thing a person can do with a broken heart. Fill it back up with somebody the person you lost would have been glad to hand it to." Ethan didn't trust himself to answer that, so he just put his arm around Carol's shoulders and squeezed, and the two of them stood there watching the barbecue for a moment, watching the family that had grown back where an amputation had been. And that was when Olivia caught his eye across the yard and gave him a small private nod. The nod. The one they'd agreed on that morning standing in the kitchen, while Lily was still asleep, both of them nervous as teenagers. If it feels right. If the moment shows up, we'll know. And it had shown up, and they knew. Ethan handed his uneaten plate to Carol. "What are you?" Carol started, and then she saw his face, and then she saw Olivia crossing the yard toward him, with Lily in tow, and Carol's hand went to her mouth. Oh, you're not. Right now, here. Right now," Ethan said. "Here, where it started. Because it had started here. Exactly here 1 year ago, at this same barbecue, when a shy woman with cold fingers had pressed a folded note into his hand and whispered 5 words that cracked his whole locked life open. And they'd talked about it, and they'd decided if they were going to do this, they were going to do it in the same place the note had happened, so the barbecue where Olivia was too scared to say anything would become the barbecue where everything got said out loud. Same place you gave up. Make it the place you finally didn't. She'd taught him that. Now he was using it back. Olivia reached him. Lily was practically vibrating beside her because Lily was 9 and Lily had been let in on exactly enough of the plan to make her the happiest co-conspirator in the history of the world, and Lily could not keep a secret to save her life, which was the only reason Ethan had timed it, for the very moment they were all together before the kid burst. "Okay," Olivia said quietly, just to him, her voice not quite steady. "You said you'd know the moment. Is this the moment because Lily is about to explode and I've had this in my pocket all day and I keep touching it to make sure it's still there?" "It's the moment," Ethan said. And here was the thing they'd decided, the thing that mattered, the thing that made it theirs. They weren't doing it the usual way. There'd been a lot of long conversations over the past months, quiet ones after Lily was in bed about how a widower proposes, about the weight of it, about a first marriage, and a second one about how you honor the first without living in its shadow. And somewhere in all those conversations, Olivia had said the thing that settled it. "I don't want you to get down on one knee for me," she'd said. That was Sarah's. That's yours and Sarah's, that first time, that young thing, and it should stay hers. I don't want a copy of somebody else's moment. I want our own thing, something that's only ours." So they'd made their own thing. Ethan reached into his pocket, and Olivia reached into hers. And Lily. This was Lily's whole job. The job she'd been entrusted with, the job she'd been unable to stop talking about for a week. Lily reached into the little crossbody bag she'd insisted on wearing all day, and the three of them in the middle of the neighborhood barbecue where it had all begun, each pulled out a folded piece of paper. Notes. 3 notes, because it had started with a note. And so it would go on with notes. That was the whole idea. The idea that had made Olivia cry when they came up with it at the kitchen table. Not a ring produced from a velvet box. 3 folded notes, one from each of them, handed to each other, the way Olivia had once handed Ethan the first one. Don't read it here. This stays between us, except that this time there'd be no more secrets. This time they'd read them out loud right here in front of everybody. Because the whole point was that the hiding was over. The barbecue had started to notice. A little quiet was spreading out from the 3 of them the way it does when people sense something's happening. Mrs. Kellerman had stopped mid-sentence. Denise, who was there again, and who had over the year become something almost like a friend to Olivia, had put down her drink. Even the kids were slowing up. Me first, Lily announced, because of course she went first. She was 9, and she'd been holding this in for a week, and she would not survive going second. She unfolded her paper. She'd written it herself in her own hand with her own spelling, and she read it out in a clear, loud 9-year-old voice that carried across the whole yard. Dear Miss Olivia, Lily read. This is a note to ask you a question. You gave me a card one time about how love doesn't leave. It just changes shape. Well, I have been thinking about it for a whole year. And I figured out that love can also change shape into a new person coming to your house. That's what you did. You changed into our person. So, my question is... Lily looked up, made sure she had the whole yard, and delivered it. Will you be my mom? You don't have to, but I already told Waffle you probably would. So, the yard made a sound, 40 people making the same soft sound at once. And Olivia Bennett, who had spent 32 years being invisible, who a woman named Denise hadn't noticed for 6 years, who had once believed with her whole heart that no one in the world would be worse off without her, went down on her knees in the grass in front of a 9-year-old, at eye level the way she'd learned to do that first day with the card, and she took Lily's face in both her hands. Yes, Olivia said. Yes, yes. You tell Waffle he was right. Tell him I said yes. Lily threw her arms around her neck and Olivia held on, and the yard was clapping now, some of them crying, and Ethan stood above the 2 of them, with his own note still folded in his hand, and thought his chest might not be big enough for what was in it. Okay, Lily said, wriggling free business not yet concluded. But that was just my part. Dad has a part. Dad, do your part. And the yard laughed and turned to Ethan, and Ethan unfolded his note. He'd rewritten it 11 times. He had it memorized, but he read it off the paper anyway because reading it off a paper was the whole point, because a note was where this had started, and a note was a thing you could hold and keep in a box, and he wanted her to be able to keep this one. Olivia, he read, and his voice was rough from the first word, and he let it be. 1 year ago at this barbecue you put a note in my hand and told me it was a secret, and I spent that whole night terrified because I thought a secret could only be bad news. I want to tell you what I know now that I didn't know then. He looked up at her kneeling in the grass with their daughter, and then back down at the paper because he couldn't get through it looking at her. I know that you sat 3 houses away from me for 6 years, and you saw me and you kept me alive without my knowing it, the same way I kept you alive without knowing it. I know that the loneliest man in the neighborhood and the loneliest woman in the neighborhood lived 100 yards apart for 6 years, both of us sure we were the only one. And I know that it took you being braver than I have ever been in my life. 1 folded note. 1 terrifying walk to a boathouse to fix a thing that 6 years of silence never could. His voice cracked and he pushed on. So here's my note back. 1 year late, but you taught me late still counts. You did a brave thing, Olivia. You just did it slow. And it saved both our lives. Marry me. Marry us. Let me spend the rest of my life being the person you knock on the door for. He didn't get down on one knee. He'd promised her he wouldn't, and he didn't. Instead, he did the thing they'd planned, the thing that was only theirs. He held out his hand, the same hand she'd taken on the boathouse bench a year ago, and he said the words that had brought her 100 yards down a sidewalk she couldn't cross. "One step, that's all. I'll be right here the whole way, but you have to take it yourself because it's yours." And Olivia Bennet stood up out of the grass and looked at the hand held out to her, the same way she'd looked at it on her own front porch a year ago, when she couldn't make her feet move. And this time, there was no fight in her face, no 31 years of turning around, no ghost. This time, she just took the step. Easy. Like it was nothing. Like it was the most natural thing in the world to walk toward a person who'd promised to be there. She put her hand in his. "There's still one more note," she said, and her voice was shaking, but her eyes were dry and bright and certain. "Mine. And I've been carrying it a year, so everybody's going to have to let me get through it." She unfolded her paper, and the yard went quiet again, the deepest quiet yet, and Olivia read the last note. "A year ago," she read, "I wrote you a note because I was afraid I was going to lose you to somebody braver than me. I want to tell all of you something because you're my neighbors, and some of you have known me my whole life and never really knew me at all. And that was mostly my fault, and I'm done with it being anybody's fault." She lifted her chin. "For a long time, I believed I was a person nobody would miss. I believed it so hard that there was a night a few winters ago when I nearly let it win." A ripple went through the yard, the soft intake of people understanding what she was telling them, and Olivia did not flinch from it, did not soften it, said it plain, because plain was the only way she had left to say anything. "And the only reason I'm standing here, the only reason there's a barbecue with me in it at all, is that a man I barely knew crossed 2 frozen yards with a bowl of soup his little girl made and knocked on my door and would not leave." She turned from the crowd to Ethan. "You want to know the truest thing I've ever learned," she said just to him now, though the whole yard heard it. "It's not that the love doesn't leave. I taught Lily that one and it's true, but it's not the truest one. The truest one is this. Sometimes the person who saves your life doesn't even know they're doing it. They think they're just being neighborly. They think it's just soup. And that means—" Her voice broke clean open and she let it. "That means any one of us, any ordinary Tuesday, might be the soup for somebody. Might be the thing that keeps a person here one more winter without ever knowing we did it. You did that for me, Ethan. You did it by accident. And I have spent a year learning to do it on purpose." She squeezed his hand. "So yes. 1,000 times yes. I'll marry you. I'll marry both of you. I'll spend the rest of my life crossing yards. I'll be the person who knocks, and I'll be the person who answers whichever one anybody needs that day. Just yes." And Ethan Carter pulled her in, and this time there was no 9-year-old to spring apart from, because the 9-year-old was already wrapped around both of them. And he kissed the woman who used to live 3 houses down, while the whole neighborhood that had watched her disappear now stood in a yard watching her come all the way back, clapping and crying and hollering Carol loudest of all, and Denise right beside her, and Mrs. Kellerman dabbing her eyes and telling anyone who'd listen that she'd called it years ago. They didn't rush the wedding. There was no need to rush anything anymore. Rushing is what you do when you're afraid the thing will get away from you, and none of them were afraid anymore. It was small in the fall in the backyard where Lily had once had a 5th birthday party a lonely woman listened to through a window. Olivia walked herself down the aisle, because she'd asked to, because there was nobody to give her away, and she'd said she liked it that way. "I gave myself away once to the dark, and I want to be the one who gives myself back." Lily held the rings and did not drop them, though it was close. And when it came time for vows, they didn't say the traditional ones. They read notes. Because of course they did. There was one more thing, though. One thing Olivia did that nobody had planned that she hadn't told even Ethan about. At the reception, when the speeches were winding down, she stood up with a small cardboard box in her hands, and the whole yard recognized it, because she'd told this story now she'd stopped hiding it, and everyone knew about the box. The box of a lonely woman's unsent love. The photographs through the window, the movie stubs, the stolen key, the letters never mailed. "I've been carrying this a long time," she said. "Some of you know what's in it. It's every moment I was too scared to live, saved up in a box watched through a window instead of walked into. She looked at Ethan and at Lily in her flower girl dress. I don't need it anymore. I don't have to save moments in a box because I finally get to be in them. So I'm going to do something with it. She walked over to the fire pit at the edge of the yard, the one that had been lit against the fall chill, and Ethan started to rise alarmed. Those photographs, those letters, 3 years of her heart. But she caught his eye and shook her head. It's okay. Trust me. The same 2 words that had started everything. And one by one, she fed the box to the fire. Not the card. She kept Lily's card. That one lived in a frame on the wall. Now the love doesn't leave. It just changes shape card, where a growing girl could read it whenever she needed to. But the photographs of a family watched through a window, she burned because she was in the family now and didn't need to watch it from outside. The movie stubs she burned because she went to movies with them now and sat in the same row. The letters never sent she burned because she had no unsent words left. She'd said all of it out loud in front of everybody. And last she took out the little brass key on its worn leather fob, the garage key she'd kept for 2 years because it was the only piece of him she'd had, and she did not burn that one. She walked back to Ethan and pressed it into his hand. You told me once to keep it, she said, because you gave it to me instead of me taking it. I did keep it. For a year I kept it, and it meant everything. She closed his fingers around it. But I don't need a key to a piece of you anymore, because I've got the whole house now. So I'm giving it back. Not because I'm losing anything. Because I finally have so much that I can afford to give some away. She smiled, and it was the smile of a woman who had against every odd come all the way home. That's the thing nobody tells you about not being lonely anymore, Ethan. You get so full you can start giving it away. Ethan looked down at the brass key in his palm, the little piece of himself that a drowning woman had once held on to because it was all she had. And he understood that she'd just handed him back not a key, but the whole story of how far she'd come from a woman who had to steal a piece of a person, to a woman with so much love. She was returning the change. He didn't put the key on his ring. He put it in his pocket over his heart, and he kept it there, and he keeps it there still. The neighborhood tells the story now. It's become one of those stories a place keeps and passes around the way places do. The shy woman in the blue house and the widower 3 doors down, both of them drowning 100 yards apart. Both certain they were alone, and the note and the boathouse and the box and the barbecue where it ended, right where it began. People tell it to newcomers. They tell it to teenagers who think nobody understands them. Mrs. Kellerman tells it worst of all, embellishing wildly. But she always gets the ending right, and the ending is always the same, and it's always the part that matters. Because the point of the story was never the romance. Though there was romance. The point was the yard. The 100 yards nobody would cross. The point was that a whole neighborhood watched a woman disappear and felt bad about it from a distance. And one ordinary man with a bowl of soup did the one thing none of the rest of them did. He crossed the yard. He didn't do it because he was a hero. He did it because he happened to notice somebody was alone, and he couldn't stand the thought of leaving them that way. And he had no idea, none at all, that crossing 100 yards with soup his daughter made would be the thing that kept a human being on this earth. You never know which yard is the one that matters. You never know that the quiet neighbor, the one who waves but never stops. The one whose garden tries too hard is sitting in the dark doing math about whether anyone would notice. You only know that they're 3 houses down, and that it's 100 yards, and that you could cross it. So cross it. That's the whole story. That's the only thing it was ever trying to say. Somewhere near you right now, someone is standing by the snacks. Sure, they're the only one waiting for a single person to notice and come stand with them. It doesn't take a grand gesture. It never did. It takes soup and a knock and the refusal to leave. It takes one person deciding that feeling bad from a distance isn't enough. It takes crossing the yard. Ethan Carter crossed a yard once by accident, and it gave him back a life he thought he'd finished living, and it gave a woman back the years she almost didn't get, and it gave a little girl a mother the love had changed shape into. 3 houses, 100 yards. That's all it ever took, and that's all it will ever take. And that is the truest thing this story has to give you. The person whose life you save may be standing closer than you think, and the only thing they need is for you to be brave enough just once to walk across. So the next time you notice someone standing alone by the snacks, go. Don't wait. Don't feel bad from a distance. Put on your shoes and cross the yard and knock and refuse to leave. It might be the most ordinary thing you ever do. It might also be everything. And that is where the story ends. Not with a secret whispered in the dark, but with a door standing open, a fire burning low, and 3 people who found their way home to each other, proving once and for all that the quiet love standing right beside us has been waiting all along for nothing more than the courage to be seen.